First Mountain. The Initiation. Chapter 12. The Gnostic Church. The rigorous trials of initiation by ordeal are well known by those that have already crossed to the other side. It is not a crime to separate us from the monster with 1,000 heads, humanity, so as to help it in an efficient manner. I was 30 years old when I was submitted to terrible and frightful trials. It is worth the trouble to report what I then saw, what happened to me. It was during the night of mystery when I felt near me the howl of a hurricane. Then I understood how lonely I was that night. However, whenever I went, here, there, anywhere, I soon saw myself surrounded by multitudes. I do not know how the people came to me, and then again the hurricane howled. Then I understood what it was that was taken by the wind. Today I speak because which rumor sounds afar, that the silence of the serene and black night interrupted? Is it the swift run of the horse, stretched in a flying escape, or the harsh roar of the hungry beast, or the whistle perhaps of Achilles, or the hoarse echo of far-off thunder, rumbling along the deep caverns, or the sea threatening with its swollen trough, a new Lucifer the throne of his God? Because all those specters from the night of mystery were also seen by that poet, who sang thus: dense fog covers the sky, and of spirits becomes full, wandering. Hear the wind, and there they cross, vaporous and countless, and here they take, and there they gyrate. Now they get together, they withdraw, now they hide, now they appear, they rove, they fly. Vague swarm of vain ghosts, of diverse shapes, of varied color, on goats and serpents mounted, and on ravens, and on broomsticks with dull rumor. They pass on and escape, return and grow. They decrease, evaporate, color, and among shadows and reflections, near and far away. Now they vanish. Now they avoid me with fear. Now they get agitated with fury in an aerial fantastic dance around me. All those screams, howls, whistles, neighs, chirping, moos, squawks, meows, barking, snorts and snores the clairvoyant poet goes on hearing, talking to us with words that are livid and phosphoric brushstrokes by El Greco, in extraordinary apparitions such as those in Los Caprichos by Goya. Everywhere shields with rampant lions, shells from Compostela, beheaded Moors, fleurs de lis and trout, everywhere palaces and old houses in ruins, poverty and more poverty. Many times, I had to confront bravely the black powers referred to by the Apostle Paul of Tarsus in chapter 2 of the Epistle to the Ephesians. Unquestionably, the most dangerous adversary of that night had the ghastly title of Anagarika. I want to refer in an emphatic manner to the demon Chirenzi. That repugnant and sinister creature had taught the world black tantrism, sexual magic with seminal ejaculation. The result was apparent at a glance: diabolical tail and horrifying horns. That left-hand tantric demon arrived at my presence accompanied by 2 demons. He appeared very satisfied with the abominable organ Kundardaguator, the satanic, magic, terrible tail, the sexual fire projected from the coccyx towards the atomic hells of man, sequence and corollary of the black tantrism. At point blank I asked him the following question: do you know me? Answer: yes. I saw you in the city of Bacata when I was giving a lecture. What happened then was not very pleasant. That Anagarika had recognized me, and enraged he emitted fire by the eyes and tail. He wanted to hurt me violently. I defended myself with the best conjurations from high magic, and finally he ran away with his companions. Lonely, I continued my course into the night of the mystery. The hurricane howled. In the profound depths of my consciousness, I had the strange sensation of being in the process of saying goodbye to everything and everybody. I entered the Gnostic church panting, tired after having fought many times against the tyranny of the prince of the powers of the air, who is the spirit that now reigns over the sons of infidelity. Temple of luminous marble, it appeared to be made of crystal because of its rare transparency. The terrace of that transcended church dominated invincible like a glorious acropolis over the solemn site of a sacred pine grove. From here, the starred, shining firmament could be contemplated as in ancient times in the Atlantean temples, those yearn today in the extraordinary poetry of Maeterlinck, and from which Ahura Maya, the astronomer disciple of Narada, made the previous observations to discover the chronological cycles of thousands of years, teaching them to his beloved disciples at the light of the pale moon, and still being used by his devoted successors. I advanced very slowly and in a reverent attitude into the holy place. Something, however, surprises me. I see a certain person that crossing my path stops my progress. Another battle? I prepare my defense, but the person smiles sweetly and exclaims with a voice from paradise. You do not frighten me, I know you very well. Ah. I recognize him at last. He is my guru Adolfo, who I have always called by the diminutive Adolfito by God and the Virgin Mary. But what was I doing? I am sorry, Master. I had not recognized you. My guru leads me by the hand towards the interior of the Gnostic church. The Mahatma sits down and then invites me to sit at his side. Impossible to decline such a splendid invitation. The dialogue that took place then between master and disciple was certainly extraordinary. Here in the Gnostic church said the Hierophant solemnly, you can only be married to one woman, not two. In the past, you gave vain hopes to a certain Lady XX, who still waits for you in spite of the time and distance. Obviously, you are unconsciously doing her a grave harm, because, waiting for you, she lives in a city in a total state of poverty. This lady could well return to live in the bosom of her family in the country, thus, her economic problems would be resolved. Made aghast and bewildered by these words, I embraced my guru, thanking him infinitely for his advice. Master, I said, what can you tell me about my wife Lytolantes? She can indeed help you with sexual magic, Sahaja Methuna. With this lady adept you can work in the ninth sphere, the sex. Oh, Guru! I wish with infinite yearning the awakening of the Kundalini and the union with the intimate, cost what it may. But what have you said, my disciple? Cost what it may. Yes, Master, this I have said. Somebody has been paid here tonight and has been given the task of helping you in the awakening of the Kundalini. You have passed the Dyrene test, said the Hierophant. And then, putting on my head a white, immaculate turban with a golden button in front, said, let us go to the altar. Getting up, I advanced with my holy guru towards the holy altar. I still remember that solemn instant in which, kneeling in front of the holy altar, I had to swear solemnly. Cost what it may, said my master in a loud voice. And this sentence, intensely vibrating, was soon repeated from sphere to sphere. I then covered my solar plexus with the palm of the left hand and extended my right hand over the Holy Grail, saying, I swear it. Terrible oath. Genuine legends from Castile, such as that of Alfonso VII taking away from the hands of the Moors from Almeria the famous bowl or grail, better said, a cup carved from an enormous emerald and said to have been used by the great Kabir Jesus in his Last Supper. It is terrifyingly divine. To swear in the presence of the Holy Grail. Ancient legends say that Joseph of Arimathea received in this cup at the foot of the cross in the Mount of the Skulls the holy blood that poured out of the wounds of the adorable. A similar cup was given before by the Queen of Sheba to Solomon, the Solar King, and was an inheritance, according to others, of the Tuatha De Danann, a Jinn race of the Gedhil, the British Galicia. It is not known how this venerated relic happened to end up at the Hermitage of San Juan de la Pena, in the Pyrenees. From there it continued its pilgrimage, now to Salvatierra, now to Valencia during the reign of Jaime I the Conqueror, now to Genoa, since in ancient times the Genoese had received it as a reward for the help given to Alfonso VII during the siege of Almeria. Epilogue. Very early next day I wrote to the suffering noble lady who waited for me in that remote city. I advised her with infinite sweetness to return to the country with her family and to forget my worthless, insignificant person. Chapter 13. The First Initiation of Fire. When dealing with transcendental and practical esotericism, we can indeed must emphasize the following. Everything that has been said in pure occultism concerning geomantic tables, astrology, magic herbs, wonderful parchments with cryptographic languages, in spite of being absolutely true and noble, is certainly nothing but the kindergarten, the lesser part of the great wisdom inherited from the Orient, that consists of the radical transformation of oneself by means of the revolutionary asceticism of the new Aquarian age, an extraordinary mixture of sexual anxiety and spiritual yearning. We Gnostics are in reality the chosen, possessors of the three riches, that is, A. The Philosopher's Stone, B. The Clavicle of Solomon, C. The Genesis of Enoch. These three factors constitute the living foundation of the Apocalypse, as well as those of the collections of Pistorius, of the Theosophy of Porphyrio, and of many other extremely ancient secrets. The radical absolute change inside us, here and now, would be impossible without the Philosopher's Stone. Speaking clearly and in plain language, I declare, the ens seminis, the entity of semen, is that venerable matter referred to by Sendivogus with which we must prepare the Philosopher's Stone. Sexual magic is the way. Thus, I understood in my present reincarnation when I undertook the preparation of the Philosopher's Stone. By means of that blessed stone we can satisfy that alchemist maxim that says, solve ite coagule. We need to dissolve the psychological ego and coagulate in ourselves the sexual hydrogen C12 in the form of solar bodies, innermost powers, virtues, etc., etc., etc. The Philosopher's Stone is the one that valorizes the sexual seed and gives it the power to germinate as a mystical yeast that makes the whole metallic mass ferment and rise up, causing the king of creation to appear in its integral form. I am referring to the authentic man, not to the intellectual animal incorrectly called man. The will, thelema, acquires the power of transmutation that converts the base metals into gold, that is evil into good, in all circumstances of life. For this reason, a minimal amount of the Philosopher's Stone or projection powder is required for the transmutation. Each base metal dissolved in the crucible of the sexual alchemy is always replaced by the pure gold of a new virtue. Solve ite coagule. The modus operandi can be found in Chapter 11, 5th story of this book. More information can be found in my book The Mystery of the Golden Blossom. To light the individual fohat, fire, the flame of Eros, in our sexual alchemist laboratory is certainly the basis of the Dionysian wave, I deeply understood when studying at the feet of my guru, Adolfito. Unquestionably, I was always assisted during the metaphysical coupling. This other divine guru who was paid his salary in the temple, see Chapter 12, did his duty well. That great soul assisted me astral during the chemical coitus. I saw him make strong magnetic passes over my coccyx bone, spine, and superior part of my head. When the erotic igneous serpent of our magic powers awoke to initiate its march along the spinal canal towards interior and upper regions, I felt extremely thirsty and experienced a very sharp pain in the coccyx that lasted for several days. Then I was entertained lavishly at the temple. I was never able to forget that cosmic event. At that time, I lived in peace in a small house at the seaside, in the tropical region of the Caribbean coast. The ascent of Kundalini from vertebra to vertebra happened very slowly, in accordance with the merits of the heart. Each vertebra is very demanding. From this we can infer difficult trials. As a corollary, we assert, the ascent of the Kundalini is not possible if we do not fulfill the precise moral conditions necessary for this to happen. These 33 vertebrae are designated in the superior worlds by symbolic names, such as canons, pyramids, holy chambers, etc., etc., etc. The mystical ascent of the flame of love from vertebra to vertebra and chakra to chakra along the medullar canal certainly happened on the basis of sexual magic, including sanctification and sacrifice. The Mahatma that was assisting brought me help by guiding the sacred fire from the coccyx bone at the base of the spine to the pineal gland, situated, as is already known by the doctors, in the superior part of the brain. Subsequently, that great soul caused my erotic fire to flow into the region of the space between the eyebrows. The first initiation of fire happened as a corollary, when the igneous serpent of our magic powers made contact with the atom of the Father in the magnetic field of the root of the nose. Certainly, it was during the mystic ceremony of the Last Supper when the cosmic date of the initiation was fixed. The Holy Grail. It shines as a sacred ember, burning on the table of the Easter banquet. The true history of this Holy Grail is written in the stars and has its foundation, not in Toledo, as Wolfram von Eschenbach claims. The main known origins of these chivalric legends related to the Holy Grail are A. Historia rerum in partibus transmarinis gestarum, by William of Tyro. Circa 1184, a Latin work translated into French with the title Roman d'Oracle, book that served as a basis to the great conquest of overseas, translated in turn from French to Spanish at the end of the 13th century or beginning of the 14th. In this conquest are summarized the 5 main branches that refer to the cycle of the First Crusade: the Chanso de Antioquia, the Chanson de Jerusalem, Les Chettis, or Captives, Elias, the Knight of the Swan. B. Dolopathos by Jean de Hautseal, written around 1190. C. The legend of the poem that Paris calls Ilioxa or Helioxa, the solar calf, primitive name of the Insuberta or Isisbetha of the Knight of the Swan, work this one of many analogies, according to Gallegos, with the famous Amadis de Gaula. D. Parsifal and Titurel of Eschenbach. E. Count of the Grail by Chrétien de Troyes, 1175, the Lohengrin or Swanritter, the Knight of the Swan, anonymous Bavarian work of the 13th century published by Goerez in 1813. F. Tristan and Isolde, by Godfrey of Strasbourg, 1200 to 1220, and the many similar Tristans which can be found in the literature. G. The Demand of the Holy Grail with the marvelous deeds of Lanzarote and his son Galahad, 14th century, with all its concordant works. I waited with infinite anxiety for the date and time of the initiation. It concerned a very sacred 27. I wanted an initiation such as that the Commander Montenero received in the Temple of Chapultepec, or as that Ginés de Lara, the reincarnated Deva, had in the Sancta Sanctorum or a Diada of the Templar Knights, in the extraordinary night of a lunar eclipse. But my case was certainly very different, and even if it appears incredible, that night of initiation I felt defrauded. Resting on my hard bed in a humble hut at the seaside, with infinite anguish, I spent the night in vigil, waiting uselessly. My priestess wife slept, snored, sometimes she moved on her bed, or pronounced incoherent words. The sea, with its furious waves, struck the beach roaring frightfully, as if complaining. Dawn came, and nothing. 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 What a dirty night, my God. Good heavens! What intellectual and moral storms I had to experience during those deadly nocturnal hours. Really, there is no resurrection without death, nor any dawn in nature or man, without being preceded by nocturnal darkness and sadness that make its light all the more adorable. All my senses were put to trial, tortured in mortal agonies that made me cry, my Father, if possible, spare me this chalice, but not my will but yours be done. When the sun rose, like a ball of fire that appeared to grow out of the tempestuous ocean, Lytolantes woke up saying to me, "Do you remember the party that was given up there for you? You received the initiation." What? But what are you saying? Party? Initiation? Which one? I only know that I have endured a night more bitter than bile. What, said Lytolantes, astonished then you did not bring any recollection whatsoever to your physical brain. Don't you remember the great chain? Have you forgotten the words of the great initiator? Troubled by these questions, I interrogated Lytolantes, saying, "What did the great being say to me?" "You were warned," said the adept lady, "that from today on you will have double responsibility for the teachings that you give in the world. Besides," said Lytolantes, "you were dressed with the tunic of white linen of the adepts of the occult fraternity, and you were given the sword of fire." Ah, I understand. While I experienced so much bitterness in my bed of penitent and anchorite, my interior real being was receiving the cosmic initiation. Good heavens! What is happening to me? Why is it that I am so slow? I am a bit hungry. It is time to get up for breakfast. Moments later, Lytolantes gathered some dry logs in the kitchen for fuel to light up the fire. Breakfast was delicious. I ate with much relish after such a painful night. A new day. I worked as usual to earn the daily bread. I rested in bed around midday. I was feeling wakeful, so I thought that a short rest would be appropriate. Besides, in my heart I felt remorseful. I had no difficulty to go to bed in the recumbent dorsal position, that is with the mouth pointing upwards, and with the body well relaxed. Finding myself in a state of vigil, I suddenly saw that somebody had entered my room. I recognized him, a cella of the Venerable Great White Lodge. This disciple carried a book in his hands, wished to consult me and asked for a certain authorization. When I tried to answer, I spoke with a certain type of voice that astonished me. Atman, answering through the creative larynx, is terrifyingly divine. Go, my real being told him, carry out the mission you have been entrusted. The cella left, thankful. Ah, how much I have changed. Now. I understand. Those were my exclamations after the cella left. Happy, I got up from the hard bed to talk to Lytolantes. I needed to tell her what had happened. I felt something superlative, as if a transcendental change of an esoteric, divine type had taken place in the interior of my consciousness. I was eager for the coming night. That tropical day was for me like the waiting room of wisdom. I wanted to see as soon as possible the sun sinking once more into the stormy waves of the ocean like a ball of fire. When the moon started to shine on the tempestuous waters of the Caribbean, as the birds from the sky were taking shelter in their nests, I had to press Lytolantes to finish her household chores. That night we went to bed earlier than usual. I yearned for something and was in an ecstatic state. Lying down again on my hard bed of penitent and anchorite, in that Hindustani asana of the dead man, recumbent dorsal position, mouth pointing upwards, body relaxed, arms along the sides, feet touching by the heels, the tips of the fingers open. As a fan, I waited in a state of vigilant perception, alert to novelty. Suddenly, in a matter of a few thousandths of a second, I remembered a mountain far away. Then something happened that was unusual, unwanted. Instantaneously I saw myself there, on the far-off mountain top, very far from my body, my feelings, and my mind. Atman without bonds, far from the dense body and in absence of the supersensible vehicles. At such moments of samadhi, the cosmic initiation received the previous night was a palpable fact, a raw living reality that I did not even need to remember. When I put my right hand on the golden belt, I was happy to see that the sword of fire was there, exactly on the right-hand side. All the facts that Lytolantes had given to me had turned out to be accurate. How happy I felt now as spirit man, dressed of course in the white linen tunic. In a full Dionysian rapture I threw myself into the infinite sidereal space. I happily moved away from the planet Earth. Submerged in the ocean of the universal spirit of life, I wanted to return no more to this valley of sorrows, and then visited many planetary places. When I alighted softly on a gigantic planet of the unalterable infinite, unsheathing the sword of fire, I said, I dominate all this. Man is destined to be the governor of all creation, answered a hierophant that was next to me. I sheathed the sword of fire in its golden scabbard, and submerging myself even further into the sleeping waters of life, I carried out a series of extraordinary invocations and experiments. Buddhic body, come to me. Answering my call, the beautiful Helen, Ginebra, the Queen of Jinas, my adorable spiritual soul, came to me. She came into me and I in her, and formed the famous Atman Buddhi, which is much referred to by the Oriental Theosophy. Quite rightly, it has always been said that the Buddhi, spiritual soul, is like a vase made of delicate and transparent alabaster, inside which burns the flame of prana, Atman. Continuing in successive order those singular invocations made from the bottom of chaos, I called then my human soul, saying, Causal body, come to me. I saw my human soul dressed gloriously in the causal vehicle, superior theosophical monas. How interesting that moment turned out to be, when my human soul entered happily into me. At that instant the theosophical triad known by the Sanskrit terms, Atman Buddhi Manas, became integrated in an extraordinarily lucid form. Unquestionably Atman, that is the intimate, has two souls. The first is the spiritual soul, Buddhi, which is feminine. The second is the human soul, superior Manas, which is masculine. Later on, drunk with ecstasy, I called my mind as follows, mental body, come to me. I had to repeat this invocation several times, because the mind is slow to obey, but finally it turned up with much reverence, saying, Lord, here I am, I have obeyed your call, please forgive me for my lateness. Did I carry out your orders well? At the moment when I was going to give an answer, the solemn voice of my Pythagorean monad came out of my deep interior, saying, Yes. You have obeyed well, come in. That voice was like that of Ruach Elohim, that according to Moses worked on the waters at the dawn of life. It is not too much to say emphatically that I finished these invocations calling the astral body. This one also took its time in answering my esoteric call, but at last he came into me. Covered already by my supersensible vehicles, I could have called my physical body from the chaos or primitive abyss. At this moment it was on its hard bed of penitent and anchorite, and it is obvious that this body would have also obeyed the call. This is never impossible. My physical body, which in such interesting moments was on its hard bed, would have been able to abandon the three-dimensional region of Euclides, helped by the fourth aspect of Devi Kundalini, to obey my call. However, I chose then to leave that void in the sense of full, unlimited, and deep space to return to the planet Earth. I appeared at that moment as a solitary ray coming out of the abyss of the Great Mother. The return to this planet of sorrows governed by the 48 laws was achieved in a relatively quick manner. Frankly and in plain language, I declare, I returned to the physical body in total consciousness, coming into it by that marvelous door to the soul cited by Descartes. I wish to refer to the pineal gland. It is a pity that the Cartesian philosophy ignores what is objective knowledge. Since such a type of pure knowledge is actually accessible to my cognitive faculties, I have been able to write these lines for the benefit of my beloved readers. Chapter 14. The Second Initiation of Fire. Unquestionably, we can and even must assert with great emphasis the transcendent and transcendental existence of two classical types of occultism. From the whole of the varied set of historical and prehistorical processes related to the Earth and its human races, it is possible for us to infer two modalities of occultism, that is, A. Innate occultism. B. Scholastic occultism. The first of these two currents is clearly pre-flood, the second is completely post-flood. The exact parallels of these two clearly enunciated occult forms must be found by means of clairvoyance in the two modalities of the law. A. Natural and paradisiac law. Wisdom of the gods. B. Written law. Deuteronomy. Second, inferior law. It is written with characters of fire in the book of life that when the sons of God, that is, of the Elohim or of the Jinn, knew the daughters of men, the appalling and terrible Atlantean catastrophe took place, the universal flood, Genesis 6:I. Thus, the formidable empire of the first law ended, and the time was ready for the Deuteronomy or second law. The terrible imperfections of the written law are obvious and evident, torment of the great men by its appalling limitations, iron rule by lesser individuals. Moses, the illustrious sacred leader of the people of Israel, congregating his people at the Moab plain, exhibits for all to see the extraordinary prodigies that the Lord had brought about on their behalf since the first alliance was established at Mount Sinai, and repeated the law with new illustrations, pronouncing awesome warnings against its transgressors and promising just rewards and successes of all kinds to those that observe it faithfully. Moses, transfigured at Mount Nebo, after having blessed the 12 tribes of Israel, contemplates the promised land, the Elysian fields or Jinn world, the land that flows with milk and honey, the etheric world, the fourth dimension. Moses did not die like other men. He disappeared on Mount Nebo. His corpse was never found. What happened to it? Moses returned to the happy land of the Nordic chants and druids, became Jinn, an inhabitant of paradise. With total lucidity, we have been able to verify completely the impressive, clear, and definitive fact that it is precisely there, in the superliminal world, in the fourth dimension, where in other times lived the happy people of ancient Arcadia. I wish to refer specifically to the paradisiac humanities of ancient times. When John the Baptist was beheaded, the great Kabir Jesus departed into a desert place by ship privately, that is, to the land of Jinn, to the fourth coordinate of our planet Earth, and it is there where he performed in front of the multitude the miracle of the 5 loaves and 2 fish that fed no less than 5,000 men without counting women and children, being left over 12 baskets full of pieces. Luke 9 verses 12 to 17. It is clear that the great Gnostic priest Jesus also had to transfer the crowds to the fourth dimension, with the obvious intention of carrying out the miracle. Ancient Irish traditions, confined wisely to the delightful chants of the bards, speak of an extraordinary people, the Tuatha De Danann, governed by priests kings extremely skillful in all kinds of magic arts, learned in Thebes. Obviously, it is an instance of a great Jinn nation, prototype of the wandering Jew, the tireless traveler. The Tuatha De Danann traveled around the Mediterranean countries until they arrived in Scandinavia, where they founded, besides a lunar and a solar city, 4 great magic cities. When the Tuatha arrived back in Ireland, they landed on this island protected, like Aeneas was in Carthage, by a special magic fog, or veil of Isis of the fourth dimension, that hid them. In other words, the Tuatha arrived back to Ireland by the fourth dimension. It is described in old chronicles the famous Battle of Madura, where they were covered in glory, defeating the sinister Firbolgs. It was, in fact, so tremendous the excellence of the Tuatha De Danann, so powerful and innumerable their soldiers, that the plains were full of hordes of combatants that were spread as far as the regions where the sun sets at the end of the day. Their heroes were immortalized in front of Tara, the magical capital of Ireland. The Tuatha did not arrive in Erin in any kind of known ship, and nobody was able to determine clearly whether they were people born on earth or had come down from heaven, or if they were diabolic entities or a new nation who would not in any way be human unless the blood of Berthak, the tireless, the founder of primitive Sane, run in their veins. When the great Atlantean catastrophe took place, the Tuatha De Danann went into the fourth dimension forever. Some happy human races inhabit the etheric region of our planet Earth. These people, even in our days of sorrow, still live in a paradisiacal state. In the fourth coordinate of our planet Earth, there are many magic cities of splendid beauty. In the fourth terrestrial vertical, we can discover the elemental paradises of nature, with all their temples, valleys, enchanted lakes, and lands of Jinn. Unquestionably, it is there, in the promised land, where, happily, we can still find the innate occultism and the natural and paradisiacal law. Those blessed Jinn that live happily in the Elysian fields, in the land that flows with milk and honey, are certainly not subject to the regency of the Deuteronomy or second law that torments mortals so much. Obviously, the Jinn masses, such as those known as the Tuatha De Danann, live happily in Eden under the regency of the first law. The Tuatha De Danann always carried with them 4 esoteric magic symbols when undertaking their legendary exodus. A gigantic cup or grail, living symbol of the feminine uterus. B. An enormous lance of pure iron, phallic masculine symbol. C. A great sword of fire, symbol of the sexual fire. D. The truth stone, symbol of the philosopher's stone, sexual. If Moses, the great Hebrew leader, had not known the deep significance of these 4 magic symbols, he would have never become Jinn at Mount Nebo. Thus, I understood it when, prostrated in the presence of the solar logos, I asked him with complete humility for admission to the second initiation of fire. It is impossible to forget those moments in which the Blessed One entrusted to a certain specialist the sacred mission of conducting wisely by my spine the second degree of the power of fire. I wanted to know thoroughly the mysteries of the fourth coordinate and penetrate victorious into the promised land. I needed with maximum crucial urgency to restore the igneous powers in my vital etheric substance. When the second serpent woke up to start its ascent along the etheric spine, towards the interior and upper regions, I was entertained lavishly at the temple with a great cosmic festival. The jinn specialist assisted me during the metaphysical copulation. Lytolantes and I were aware of him with the sixth sense. Ostensibly, I was not abandoned. The jinn helped me with strong magnetic passes that went from the coccyx to the pineal gland. That master had taken on his shoulders a large moral responsibility. He had to lead in an intelligent manner the living and philosophical fire along the medullary spinal channel of the famous theosophical lingam sarira, vital substance of the human organism. Obviously, such a vehicle is only the superior section of the physical body, the tetradimensional aspect of our physical body. This initiation is much more laborious, thus the solar logos had told me. However, I yearned with infinite longing to know the mysteries of the etheric world, to enter the promised land. The shining ascent of the second serpent of fire along the medullar channel, from vertebra to vertebra and chakra to chakra, happened very slowly, according to the merits of the heart. Each spinal vertebra of etheric type implies certain virtues. Ostensibly, we must be tested before arriving to such and such vertebra. Let us remember that gold is tested with fire and virtue with temptation. The legs of the thrones of the gods have animal shapes. The dark ones endlessly attack those who try to achieve any degree of the occult masonry in the spine. Heaven is taken by assault, the valiant ones have taken it. In the country of the 1001 Nights, there also are mystical banquets. I attended one of those dinners. The guests were very well served by swans of immaculate whiteness at the banks of a crystalline lake. On another occasion, I was taught the following cosmic law: never mix opposing forces in the same house, because the mixture of two contrasting currents gives rise to a third force, which is destructive for everybody. For ethers constitute the vital body. A. Reflective ether. B. Luminous ether. C. Chemical ether. D. Ether of life. The first of these ethers is found intimately related to the various functions of the will and the imagination. The second is secretly associated with all sensory and extrasensory perceptions. The third serves as the foundation for all biochemical organic processes. The fourth serves as an agency for the forces that work with the reproductive processes of the races. During the second initiation of fire, I learned how to free the two superior ethers, so as to travel with them far from the physical body. Unquestionably, the clairvoyant and clairaudient perceptions are extraordinarily intensified when one absorbs the two superior ethers in the astral body. Such ethers allow us to bring to the physical brain the totality of the supersensible memories. The esoteric vivid explanation of the mystic decapitation given to me in a scenic form was certainly extraordinary. I was invited to a macabre banquet, and what I saw on the tragic table was actually terrifying. Profane bloody head placed on a silver tray, everything adorned with something that is better not talked about. Its deep significance showed clearly: the animal ego, the oneself, the myself, must be beheaded. From this we can deduce the definitive fact that the head of John the Baptist on resplendent silver has certainly an identical meaning. Unquestionably John, the precursor, taught this terrible truth mounting the altar of the supreme sacrifice. Examining old chronicles with the tenacity of a monk in his cell, we discovered the following. The Nazarenes were also known as Baptists, Sabaeans, and Christians of St. John. Their belief was that the Messiah was not the Son of God, but simply a prophet that wanted to follow John. Origen, Volume 2, page 150, observes that there are some that say of John that he was the Anointed One, Christus. When the metaphysical conceptions of the Gnostics, who saw in Jesus the Logos and the Anointed One, started to gain ground, the primitive Christians parted from the Nazarenes, who accused Jesus of perverting the doctrines of John and to change for another the baptism in the Jordan. Codex Nazareus, page 109. It is not too much to assert with great emphasis the transcendental fact that John the Baptist was also a Christus. On the other hand, considered from the standpoint of the Logos, perfect multiple unity, We can say that he has saved those who have died in themselves, those who have decapitated the animal ego and have defeated the kingdom of shadows, hell. As a consequence, or corollary, I totally understood all this when I saw the macabre table in the banquet hall. When I abandoned that unusual and abysmal place, the adepts of the occult brotherhood gave me a beautiful present. It was a minuscule magic instrument, by means of which I can act as a magician modifying my features. Those who have seen my photos can verify by themselves the concrete fact that I can voluntarily modify the characteristics of my face. The varied forms of my face puzzle the best photographers. However, I confess frankly and in plain language that it is not I who has this power, but the intimate, my inner real being, Atman the Ineffable. He operates in this manner when necessary. My insignificant person is worthless, the work is everything. I am certainly no more than an ordinary worm in the mud of the earth. If I were to write at great length everything that us, the mystics, have experienced in the 33 holy chambers of the etheric world, we would fill many volumes. Thus, I prefer to speak in synthesis. When the second degree of the power of fire reached the height of the creative larynx, I was put in jail. The accusatory act said textually as follows: "This gentleman, besides committing the crime of healing the sick, is also the author of a book entitled The Perfect Matrimony that is an outrage against public morality and the good customs of the citizens." I had to undergo the classical ceremony of decapitation in a horrifying dungeon in an old South American prison. Then I saw, at the foot of an old tower, my divine mother Kundalini with the sword of fire in her right hand, beheading a creature. "Ah, I understand now," I said, surrounded by the frightening darkness of the horrible dungeon. Later on, I entered into that delicious state which in high yoga is known as nirvikalpa samadhi. Outside that other dungeon known as the physical body, in a state of ecstasy I experienced in myself the great profound interior reality. He, my monad, entered in me, in my soul, and then I was totally transfigured. In lucid fullness I saw myself integrally. He is the fifth of the 7 spirits before the throne of the Lamb, and I am his Bodhisattva. This reminds us of that phrase of Muhammad, "Allah is Allah and Muhammad is his prophet." When I left that prison, I went home. There my best friends were waiting for me. Days later, the second degree of the power of fire made direct contact with the atom of the Father, situated in the magnetic field of the root of the nose. Then I saw in a nocturnal vision the star of fire with the eye of God in its center. The shining pentalpha detached itself from the Sun Christ to shine above my head. The cosmic festival of the night of initiation was extraordinary. From the threshold of the temple, I saw my real being, the intimate, crucified in its cross at the very sacred end of the sanctuary and before the brothers of the occult brotherhood. While he received the initiation, I, in the vestibule of the temple, was settling my accounts with the lords of karma. Chapter 15, the third initiation of fire. Death is unquestionably something deeply significant. It is an urgent task to investigate this subject thoroughly, to extend its study sincerely and completely, with infinite patience and at every level of the mind. As a consequence, or profound corollary, we can and even must affirm solemnly the following postulate: only by completely bringing to light the mysteries of death, we can discover the origin of life. If the seed does not die, the plant is not born. Death and conception find themselves intimately associated. While exhaling the last breath of our existence, we project inevitably, across time and space, the electrical design of our own existence. Ostensibly, such an electropsychical design comes later on to impregnate the fertilized egg, thus we return. The footprints of the hooves of the horse of death form the path of life. The last moments of the dying person are found to be secretly linked to the amorous delectations of our future earthly parents. The destiny that waits for us beyond death will be a repetition of our present life, plus its consequences. What continues beyond the grave are my affections, my tenderness, my hates. I want, I do not want, I envy, I wish, I come back, I kill, I lust, I am angry, I covet, etc., etc., etc. The whole of that legion of egos, a true legion of demons personifying psychological defects, returns, comes back, rejoins. It would be absurd for me to talk about an individual ego. It is better to talk clearly about a pluralized ego. Orthodox esoteric Buddhism teaches that the ego is a sum of psychical aggregates. The Egyptian book The Occult Abode mentions with great emphasis the red demons of Seth, the devil egos that constitute the ego. Those fighting, noisy egos constitute the dark legions, against which Arjuna had to fight following orders coming directly from the blessed Lord Krishna. See the Bhagavad Gita. The personality does not return, is a daughter of its time, has a beginning and an end. The only thing that continues with certainty is an assortment of devils. We can reach immortality in the astral world. However, this is only possible by fabricating the eidolon, astral body. Diverse authors of a pseudo-esotericist and pseudo-occultist type make the mistake of confusing the ego with the astral body. The modern metaphysical literature says much about the projections of the astral body. However, we must have the courage to acknowledge the fact that those fond of occultism sometimes break down into the ego to travel in the sublunary regions of nature across time and space. The astral body is not an indispensable implement for existence. It is not too much to remember that the physical body has fortunately a vital core or lingam sarira that guarantees its existence completely. Unquestionably, the astral body is a luxury that few people can afford. Rare are the individuals who are born with this splendid vehicle. The raw material for the great work, the alchemical element by means of which we can fabricate the astral body, is sexual hydrogen C125. Obviously, this hydrogen represents the final product of the transformation of the food inside the marvelous laboratory of the organism. It is evident that this is the most important material with which the sex works. The preparation of this substance is carried in rhythmic consonance with the 7 notes of the musical scale. It is not too much to understand that the ens seminis and its peculiar hydrogen C12 is seed and fruit at the same time. To transmute this marvelous hydrogen so as to give it intelligent crystallization in a superior octave means, in fact, to create a new life inside the existing organism, to give evident form to the sidereal or astral body of the alchemists and Kabbalist. You must understand that the astral body is born of the same material, the same substance of which the physical body is born. The only thing that is different is the procedure. The whole of the physical body, all its cells, remain, so to say, impregnated by the emanations of the matter that is C12. And when these have sufficiently saturated, the matter C12 starts to crystallize. The crystallization of this matter constitutes the formation of the astral body. The transition of the matter C12 to a condition of emanations and the gradual saturation of the whole organism with these emanations is what is known in alchemy as transmutation or transformation. This transformation of the physical body into the astral body is exactly what alchemy calls the transformation of the base metals into fine ones, that is, the procuration of gold from the ordinary metals. The esoteric procedure can be found in the sex yoga, in the mithuna, in the sexual magic, connection of the lingam yoni, phallus uterus without ejaculation of the ens seminis. The restrained desire will give rise to marvelous processes of crystallization of the hydrogen C12 in a superior octave. Nourishment is different. Unquestionably, the astral body needs its nourishment and nutrition. This is obvious. Since the physical body is wisely controlled by 48 laws, a fact that has been scientifically proved by the number of the 48 chromosomes in the germinal cell, it is a clear and manifest consequence that the principal hydrogen of the cellular body is hydrogen 48. It is relatively easy to save this specific type of hydrogen when we follow the path of the straight line. The excess hydrogen 48, not spent in the physical activities of the three-dimensional Euclidean world, is marvelously converted into hydrogen 24. Ostensibly, this hydrogen 24 always becomes the extraordinary nourishment of the astral body. It is urgent to affirm with great emphasis that the sidereal or astral body of the alchemists and Kabbalists develops and unwinds marvelously under the absolute control of the 24 laws. Every organ is known clearly by its functions, and one knows that one has an astral body when one is able to travel with it. See Chapter 6 of this same treatise. My particular case was certainly extraordinary. I must specifically affirm that I was born with an astral body. I had built it in a magnificent way before being born, during the ancient ages of a bygone Mahamvantra, long before the dawn of the lunar chain. It was for me of the foremost importance to restore the igneous powers to this sidereal or astral body. Thus, I understood the situation before asking the solar logos for admission to the third initiation of fire. It is not too much to tell my beloved readers that the Great Being, after granting me what I had asked, arranged for special providence to help me. From this you can conclude that I was granted a certain specialist to help me in the third degree of the power of fire. That Gurudeva fulfilled his mission directing the third serpent of fire by the medullary canal in the astral body. Lytolantes and my insignificant, worthless person perceived with the sixth sense the astral specialist that helped us during the metaphysical copulation. The awakening of the fire in the astral body is always announced by a terrible lightning in the night. Initially, the third power of fire in such a precious vehicle has an immaculate, beautiful white color. Later on, it evolves, shining in the aura of the universe with a beautiful golden color. I confess frankly and in plain language that during the esoteric work with the third degree of the power of fire I had to live the cosmic drama in symbolic form. One, who is no more than a vile worm that crawls around in the mud of the earth, feels really touched when, suddenly and undeservedly, he sees himself converted into the central character of such a drama, even if this is done in a merely symbolic way. A difference with the two previous serpents is that the third degree of the power of fire, after touching the atom of the Father in the magnetic field of the root of the nose, continues its march towards the heart. Between the magnetic field of the root of the nose and the heart there exist secret pathways, nadis or marvelous channels. A certain secret path connects the root of the nose with the capital chakra, which controls the heart from the center of the brain. The fire circulates by that path. Later on, it continues its march towards the heart itself, circulating mysteriously by the Anahata Nadi. To live the whole drama of Christ in the astral world is doubtless something that cannot ever be forgotten. As the third degree of the power of fire develops and evolves harmoniously in the astral body, the various events of the Christic drama open up. When the sacred fire arrives to the marvelous harbor of a quiet heart, we experience then that symbolism related intimately to the death and resurrection of Christ. It is a terrible moment, that instant in which the symbolic Longinus pierces the side of the initiate with the sacred lance, the extraordinary emblem of the phallic force. Parsifal cured with such a shaft the terrible wound that burned painfully on the side of the king Ampfortas. When I was secretly approved for certain sidereal power, the sinister adepts of the left hand attacked me filled with great hate. Among the mysteries of the great cathedrals, the Holy Sepulchre is never absent, and it is evident that mine could never be missing in the initiation. At the moment when I am writing these lines, I recall the initiatory moment of Ginés de Lara. At that esoteric moment of the notable initiate there was effectively no maiden of grand ancestry, daughter of the founder of the monastery, to accompany him, and the only good man was the actual master guide. He led him to the sancta sanctorum or ediccia of that temple, where the neophyte found, in the center of a very rich room fashioned in marble, a sumptuous sepulchre hermetically closed, whose heavy lid Ginés, following the instructions of the master, lifted up easily with his hands. He found inside, to his great surprise, his own physical body. Unlike Ginés de Lara, I saw my own astral body in the sepulchre. I then understood that I had to go through an esoteric resurrection. Unquestionably, the great master mason Hiram Abiff must be resurrected in us. The king is dead. Long live the king. A realistic, hard, legitimate, authentic resurrection is only possible in the second mountain. In these paragraphs, we are definitely referring only to the symbolic initiatory resurrection. I had to stay astrally inside the Holy Sepulchre for a period of 3 days before the above-mentioned symbolic resurrection. The descent to the dark abode of Pluto was indispensable after this symbolic process of resurrection had taken place. I had to begin some gloomy recapitulations up inside the deepest bowels of the earth, where the Florentine Dante found the city of Dite. The progressive ascension slowly took place through the various strata of the submerged mineral kingdom. Scenic, vivid, progressive, ascendant recapitulation was indispensable for the total knowledge of the oneself, of the myself. To recapitulate ancient abysmal errors is sometimes useful when one tries to dissolve the ego. To know our own psychological errors is certainly urgent, imperative. I am a saint, I said in front of a group of elegant ladies that, somber, took a seat in a sumptuous abysmal salon. Those women laughed, willingly mocking me at the same time that they repeated ironically, making a provocative grimace, "Saint. Saint, saint." These unhappy creatures were right. At that time I had not yet dissolved my ego. I was a fallen bodhisattva. It is written in burning coal in the Book of All Splendors that in the abode of Pluto the truth is disguised as shadows. Demonius est Deus inversus, wrote HPB symbolic, initiatory, instructive ascension, different however from the logoic ascension of the third mountain. 19 days after initiating the ascending abysmal march, the adepts of the occult brotherhood eliminated from my lower abdomen a certain atomic layer or substance similar to the skin of the human organism. Inside the microcosmic man, such an atomic layer is like a great door that gives access to the lower abysmal depths. While this atomic element exists in the individuals, the essence will remain self-enclosed within the ego. When that atomic door is taken from the astral counterpart of the abdomen, the adepts must heal such abdominal zone. When the third degree of the power of fire manages to get out by the superior part of the cranium, it assumes the mystical figure of the Holy Ghost, a white dove with the head of a venerable old man. Immaculate divine creature perched above the tower of the temple in mystical ambush, happily waiting the supreme instant of the initiation. Remembering ancient errors committed in prior incarnations, at the 33 days I had to go through an unusual, unwanted event. 3 of the 4 fundamental states of consciousness had to be subjected to the proof of fire. It is urgent to define the 4 states of the consciousness for the benefit of our beloved readers. A. Ikasia. B. Pistis. C. Dianoia. D. Nous. The first of these 4 states is deep unconsciousness, active barbarism, infrahuman dreams, cruelty, etc., etc., etc. The second of such states corresponds exactly to all reasoning process, opinions, fanatic sectarianism, etc., etc., etc. The third manifests itself as conceptual synthetism, scientism, intellectual revision of beliefs, induction, deduction of a reflexive type, very serious studies concerning phenomena and laws, etc., etc., etc. The fourth is awakened consciousness, state of Turiya, really objective, illuminated, perfect clairvoyance, polyvision, etc., etc., etc. I emerged victorious from this difficult test. Unquestionably, in the path of the razor's edge we must be tested many times. The hermetic symbolism of this esoteric test was very interesting. 3 very serene maidens surrounded by fire. Victory was the result. Today I find myself firmly established in the dianoetic and noetic states. It is not superfluous to assert that Ikasia and Pistis were eliminated from my nature through the terrible trial by ordeal of the initiation. 37 days after having started these abysmal revisions, I had to study directly the 12 zodiac constellations, under whose regency we constantly evolve and involute. Each of the 12 zodiac constellations shines with its own peculiar hue. The astral light of the constellation of Leo has a beautiful golden color, and one feels inspired looking at it. 4 angels, who play their trumpets facing the 4 cardinal points of the planet Earth, always announce the end of the processes associated with the ascension. I was given inside the temple the white dove of the Holy Ghost, as if saying, work intensely in the 9th sphere if you want to incarnate in yourself the 3rd logos. All these symbolic processes of the ascension were finished after 40 days. The final ceremony took place in the causal world. What I then felt and saw was certainly extraordinary. The great initiator was Sanat Kumara, the founder of the great school of initiates of the Venerable White Lodge. In the altar, with the cane of 7 knots in his potent right hand, that great being shone, terrifyingly divine. Chapter 16. The fourth initiation of fire. This sad rational homunculus, incorrectly known as man, is very similar to a fatal ship full of many sinister and shadowy passengers. I wish to refer to the egos. Unquestionably, each of these has its own mind, ideas, concepts, opinions, emotions, etc., etc., etc. Obviously, we are full of infinite psychological contradictions. If we could see ourselves in a full-length mirror the way we are internally, we would feel full of horror at ourselves. The type of mind that at a given moment is expressed in ourselves through the various brain functions depends exclusively on the quality of the ego in action. See Chapter 3, paragraph entitled, The Ego. The existence of many minds in the interior of each of us is evident, obvious, and manifest. We are certainly not the possessors of an individual, particular mind. We have many minds. We need with maximal, pressing urgency to create the mental body, but this is only possible by transmuting the sexual hydrogen C12. By means of the Sahajamethuna, sexual magic, we can and even must pass on the excess sexual hydrogen C12, not used in the fabrication of the astral body, to a second octave of superior order. The crystallization of such hydrogen in the splendid and marvelous form of the mental body is an axiom of Hermetic wisdom. Obviously, this crystallization of the sexual hydrogen is solemnly processed according to the Durimi Fa Sol Si. In a second transcendent octave. Nourishment is different. It is evident that every organism that progresses into existence needs its specific food and its nourishment. The mental body is not an exception to the general rule. The surplus hydrogen 24 not spent in the nourishment of the astral body is converted into hydrogen 12. Do not confuse this with the sexual hydrogen C12. As a consequence, or evident corollary, it is valid to assert clearly that the hydrogen 12 is a cardinal and definitive nutriment for the mental body. It is not possible to achieve the total individualization of the intellect without the creation of the mental body. Only by creating such a vehicle will we possess organized inferior manas, a concrete particular individual mind. The foundation of this creation can be found in the ninth sphere, the sex. It is indispensable to work in the flaming forge of Vulcan. It is evident that one knows that one has a mental body when one can travel with it consciously and positively across the supersensible worlds. My particular case was something very special. I was born with a mental body. I had created it already in a very remote past, much earlier than the dawn of the Mahamvantra of Padma or Golden Lotus. With maximal urgency, I needed now to recapitulate the fourth initiation of fire and restore the powers of fire in this vehicle. The shining dragon of wisdom I wished to refer to the logos of the solar system of Ors gave a specialist the noble mission of assisting and helping me to raise the fourth serpent along the medullary channel of the mental body, from vertebra to vertebra and chakra to chakra, is certainly something very slow and awfully difficult. Before the flame of gold can burn with a serene light, the lamp must be taken care of and be in a place free of the wind. The terrestrial thoughts must fall dead in front of the doors of the temple. The mind that is a slave to the senses makes the soul as much of an invalid as the boat that the wind leads astray over the waters. Astounded, I perceived the multiple splendors of the marvelous pentalpha over the very sacred chandeliers of the temple. I happily crossed the lintel of the sanctuary. My thoughts burned glowingly. I understood clearly that during the work in the ninth sphere I should separate very carefully the smoke from the flames. Smoke is horror, bestiality, the flame is light, love, and transcendent chastity. Any exterior impact gives rise to undulatory reactions from the mind. These have their fundamental nucleus in the ego, the I, the myself. It is certainly indispensable to exert absolute control over these reactions. We need to become indifferent to praise and vituperation, to triumph and defeat. It is indispensable to smile at those that insult us, to kiss the whip of the executioner. Remember that hurtful words have no value other than that given to them by the offended party. When we give no value to the words of those that insult us, these words become something akin to a check that bounces. The guardian of the threshold in the world of the mind evolves into a personification of the ego. It is indispensable in the fourth initiation of fire to confront heroically the terrible trial, to defeat the terrible brother, as it is known in occult masonry. With no fear, I unsheathed the sword of fire. What happened then was extraordinary. The larva of the threshold ran away, terrified. It is clear that such a trial always takes place after the igneous wings have been opened. It is a tremendous truth that when the ascending sacred fire reaches the level of the heart, the radiant angelic wings are always opened. Unquestionably, the burning wings allow us to enter instantaneously in any department of the kingdom. Another marvelous cosmic event experienced by myself during the multiple processes of the fourth initiation of fire was that of the victorious entry by Jesus into the city beloved by the prophets. Whoever wants to enter into the Jerusalem above, the superior worlds, must liberate himself from the body, the affections, and the mind. It is urgent, indispensable, to mount the symbolic ass, the mind, tame it, control it. Only in this way we can liberate ourselves from it to enter the worlds of the spirit, the celestial Jerusalem. I felt that my worn physical body was disintegrating and would die. At that moment the divine rabbi of Galilee said in a strong voice, "That body is of no use for you any more." Happily I escaped from the destroyed shape dressed with the Tesoma Eliakon, the golden body of the solar man. When the sacred fire shone solemnly in the star of fire and in the star-shaped cross, my particular, individual divine mother Kundalini was honored in the temple. The Kundalini flourished in my fruitful lips and became the word when the fire reached the creative larynx. I still remember that time when the festival was celebrated. The adepts of the occult fraternity rewarded me with a marvelous symbol that I still possess. The moment when the fire of Kundalini reached the level of the cerebellum was extraordinary. Then my mental body went through the symbolic crucifixion of the Lord. The ascent of the erotic flame to the 32nd vertebra was very noticeable. At this moment of great solemnity, I understood the mysteries associated with the grade of lion of the law. When a superior one transcends an inferior law, the superior law washes the inferior law. The lion of the law is fought with a balance. Do good deeds to pay your debts. When the divine fire opened the lotus of the 1,000 petals, the Sahasrara chakra, a certain metallic bell solemnly made all the confines of the universe tremble. During those instants of supreme beauty, I heard ineffable choirs that resonated in the sacred space. Later on, I had to guide patiently the erotic flame towards the magnetic field at the root of the nose. Taking intelligent advantage of a certain secret nervous filament, I managed to lead the fire towards the region of the thalamus. Here is located the capital chakra, controlling the heart. Finally, I made intelligent use of the Anahata Nadi to take the sexual flame to the heart temple. The final ceremony of that initiation was really extraordinary, sublime, terrifyingly divine. That mystical night, the temple was clothed in glory. It is impossible to describe such beauty. Sanat Kumara, the great Hierophant, was waiting for me, stern, in his regal throne. I entered in this sacred enclosure with deep veneration. In front of this great immolate, as HPB used to call him, my divine mother Kundalini put on my head the yellow cloak of the Buddhas, and the extraordinary tiara in which glows the eye of Shiva. "This is my beloved son," said my mother, and then added, "He is a Buddha." The Ancient of Days, Sanat Kumara, the illustrious founder of the great school of initiates of the White Lodge on planet Earth, came close to me, put in my hands the symbol of Imperator, the sphere with the cross on top. At that moment we could hear angelic chords, regal symphonies based on the rhythms of the Mahavan and Shotavan that keep the universe firmly on its way. Chapter 17. The Fifth Initiation of Fire. We can assert with great solemnity and without much presumption the tremendous realism evident and palpable in three specific types of action. A. Acts based upon the law of accidents. B. Acts based upon the eternal laws of return and recurrence. C. Marvelous acts arising from the conscious will. The basis for the first type of action is certainly the mechanical aspect natural to this order of things. A fundamental element of the second type of action is doubtless the unceasing repetition of many dramas, comedies, and tragedies. This always happens from life to life across time and space, in the painful valley of samsara. The drama is for people more or less good, the comedy for the clowns, the tragedy for the perverse. Everything happens again as it has happened already, plus the positive or negative consequences. The main cause of the third type of action is certainly the causal body, or body of conscious will. As a consequence, or corollary, we can assert the following. The acts born of the conscious will are possible only when we have had the luxury of having created a causal body for our own use. By means of the sex yoga with its famous Sahajamethuna, sexual magic, the sexual hydrogen C12 can and must pass to a third octave of a superior order. The crystallization of this hydrogen in the splendid and marvelous form of the causal body will be processed with the notes do re mi fa sol la si in this octave. Nourishment is different. The causal body also needs its food, and this is taken from the surplus hydrogen 12 not consumed by the mental body. Unquestionably the abject people, since they do not really have a body of the conscious will, are always fatally victims of circumstances. The categorical imperative, the determinative faculty, the one that enables us to originate new circumstances, is only possible when one possesses a causal body, also known as the body of conscious will. With great sincerity and tremendous Gnostic realism, we affirm the following. The intellectual animal wrongly known as man does not have the astral, mental, and causal body. He has never created them. It is unacceptable, indefensible, inadmissible, to suppose even for an instant the total manifestation of man, when not even these supersensible vehicles have been created. If we truly want to become authentic men, it is a basic, indispensable, urgent condition to create these vehicles inside ourselves. It is a grave error to believe that the bipeds with 3 brains and 3 centers come to this world with such bodies. In the medulla and the semen there are infinite possibilities that, developed, are able to transform us into legitimate men. However, these could get lost, being normal that they actually do get lost when we do not work with the fundamental scale of the hydrogens. The intellectual humanoid is not a man, but pretends to be one, assumes wrongly that he is one, and by mere ignorance tries to usurp this position, to which he is not entitled. He believes himself to be the king of creation, when really he is not even king of himself. Immortality is something very serious. Moreover, it must be achieved by means of the Sahajamethuna, sexual magic. Whoever fabricates for himself an astral body, becomes by fact and by right immortal in the world of the 24 laws. Whoever has had the luxury of having created a mental body ostensibly reaches immortality in the world of the 12 laws. Whoever makes a causal body for himself undoubtedly reaches the desired immortality in the world of the 6 laws. Only by making the solar vehicles can we incarnate that which is called the human soul. I wish to refer to the third aspect of the Hindustani Trimurti, Atman Buddhi Manas. Much has been said concerning the famous Tasoma Heliacon, the golden body of the solar man. Unquestionably, it is the wedding dress of the soul cited by the biblical Christic gospel. Obviously, such a garment is made up of the supersensible bodies, by those extraordinary crystallizations of the sexual hydrogen C12, or Te12. It is in no way possible to penetrate into the sanctum regnum Dei, Magus Regnum, without the wedding dress of the soul. With the healthy purpose of illuminating these writings even more, we now transcribe the parable of the wedding banquet, and again Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a marriage feast for his son, and sent his servants to call those who were invited to the marriage feast, but they would not come. Again he sent other servants, saying, 'Tell those who are invited, behold, I have made ready my dinner, my oxen and my fat calves are killed, and everything is ready. Come to the marriage feast." But they made light of it and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. The king was angry, and he sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, "The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the thoroughfares and invite to the marriage feast as many as you find." And the servants went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there a man who had no wedding garment, and he said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment?" And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, "Bind him hand and foot, and cast him into the outer darkness. There men will weep and gnash their teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen." It is well known and evident that the guest not dressed in his wedding dress of the soul could not legitimately receive the name of man, even though that title is given to him simply because of love and respect for our fellow creatures. The parable would have been grotesque if it had been said that there was an animal that was not dressed for the wedding. Obviously, no animal, including the intellectual beast, can ever be dressed in the wedding dress of the soul. Let us, however, go back to my personal case, to approach closer the actual purpose of this chapter. In the name of the truth, I must say with complete clarity that I was born with 4 bodies: physical, astral, mental, and causal. It was indispensable and urgent for me to restore the power of fire in each body, to recapitulate initiations. After the 4 previous initiations, I had to pass by again patiently the 5th. Initiation of fire. Here I wish to give the term pass by again an intrinsic, transcendent, and transcendental meaning. Since in previous lives I had gone through the cosmic initiations of fire, I only needed now to pass by them again. When I asked for permission from the logos of our solar system of ores to enter the mysteries of the 5th initiation of fire, he gave me the following answer: "You do not need to ask for permission to enter the initiation, you have the right to do so." The Blessed One gave then to a noble specialist of the causal world the mission to assist and help me. This specialist had to lead the sacred fire by the medullar spinal canal of my causal body, or body of conscious will. The awakening of the 5th igneous serpent of our magic powers in the Muladhara chakra of the coccyx was celebrated in the temple with a great festivity. The ascent of the kundalini from vertebra to vertebra and chakra to chakra along the dorsal spine of the causal body happened very slowly according to the merits of the heart. Since I was born awakened, and I certainly enjoy what we can call objective consciousness and objective knowledge, it was very easy to bring back the memories of the causal world to the physical brain. I will clarify this. Modern revolutionary psychology of the new era of Aquarius uses the terms objective and subjective in the following way. A. Objective, real, spiritual, true, divine, etc. B. Subjective, vague, incoherent, imprecise, illusory, fantastic, absurd. In the world of natural causes, I understood the need to learn to obey the Father, on earth as it is in heaven. One of my main joys was to enter the temple of the music of the spheres in that cosmic region. At the threshold of the temple, the guardian taught me one of the secret greetings of the occult fraternity. The face of that guardian was like lightning. When that man lived in the world, his name was Beethoven. I found many bodhisattvas in the causal world, working intensely for humanity. These causal men operate marvelously, each under the direction of their internal God. Only the causal man has definitely achieved immortality. This class of beings is beyond good and evil, is certainly something not to be forgotten. The experience of the drama of the cosmic Christ in those regions, to become oneself the central character in the whole of the Via Crucis. We need to refine ourselves, to really purify ourselves, if it is true that we yearn to experience seriously the tremendous realities contained in the divine. Christian symbolism. Without restraining in any way my intimate yearnings, I sincerely confess that in the world of natural causes I saw myself loaded down by the weight of my own cross, faced with the profane crowds that, angrily, stoned me. Notably, I found the face of the adorable, stamped miraculously on the sacred cloth of the Veronica. It is not in vain to remember that the archaeologists have discovered many heads of stone crowned with thorns. Such statues belong to the Bronze Age. This reminds us of the thorn rune, about which we spoke in much detail in the esoteric treatise of runic magic. Anybody versed in universal Gnosticism knows very well the meaning of that rune. The deep significance of the divine face with the head crowned by thorns is Christic will. Ecstatic, I saw the cloth of the Veronica shine over the sacred altar in the night of initiation with singular, divine transparency and diaphanousness. The final cosmic event happened inevitably when the fifth serpent, after having passed by the pineal gland and the magnetic field at the root of the nose, arrived at its corresponding secret chamber in the quiet heart. Then, fused with my interior real being, I happily felt that I was going back to the infantile paradisiac state. At the end of the final ceremony, I prostrated myself before my guru Adolfito, saying, "Thank you, Venerable Master, I owe all of this to you." The blessed Mahatma, standing up, answered, "Do not thank me. What I need to know is how you are going to behave in your life." The facts speak for me, Venerable Master, you can see that such were then my words. Later on, I was visited by a great elemental genie. I wish to refer to Diaduso, who personifies the Sphinx of the desert in Egypt. That being had his feet covered with mud. I understood its deep occult esoteric meaning. "Your feet are covered with mud," I said. The mysterious creature kept silent. Unquestionably, the washing of the feet was necessary for me. When I tried to deposit the holy kiss on his cheek, he called me to order delicately, saying, "Kiss me with purity." I did so. Later on, Isis, whose veil has never been raised by a mortal, the Divine Mother, Kundalini, visited me. I asked her immediately about the results. "Oh, my mother. I have then raised the 5 serpents?" "Yes, my son. I want you to help me now to raise the 6th and 7th serpents. These are already raised." At that moment I experienced perfect self-remembrance. Ah, I am an ancient master. I was fallen, now I remember. Yes, my son, you are a master. Oh, Devi Kundalini. You are Lakshmi, the wife of Vishnu. Adorable mother. You are the divine bride of Shiva, venerable virgin. You are the aqueous Saravasti, the consort of Brahma. Oh, dear reader. Listen to me. She is certainly the eternal feminine represented by the moon and the water, the magna mater from which originates the magic M and the famous hieroglyph of Aquarius. Unquestionably, she is also the universal matrix of the great abyss, the primitive Venus, the great Virgin Mother that emerges from the waves of the sea with Cupid Eros, who is her son. Without any doubt, we must affirm frankly that she is the Hindustani Prakriti, and metaphysically Aditi and even Mula Prakriti. We could never walk the rocky path that leads to the final liberation without the help of the Divine Mother Kundalini. Chapter 18. A Supersensible Adventure. 3 friends, talking and wandering in the forest of mystery, we arrived slowly, before the sacred hill. Without much fear, we were then witnesses to something unusual and unexpected. It is urgent to write about this for the benefit of our beloved readers. An ancient rock on this stony ground opened suddenly, as if it had been split into 2 exactly equal pieces, leaving us perplexed and amazed. Before we had enough time to evaluate this, without thinking, as if attracted by a strange force, I approached the mysterious granite door. Without meeting any obstacle, I bravely crossed the threshold of a temple. In the meantime, my friends sat serenely before the great mass of stone that was closing in front of them. Any dictionary, no matter how extraordinary, would frankly be insufficient if we intended to describe in minute detail all the portents of that subterranean sanctuary. Without any savoir-faire, I prefer to speak about this in grosso modo, but with sincerity, limiting myself to narrate what happened. Lively, animated by the living flame of the spirit, I advanced along a narrow corridor until I arrived to a small drawing room. That exotic place appeared to be the office or room of a lawyer. Sitting down before the desk, I found an archon of destiny, and indecipherable. Character, hermetic judge of karma, mystic dressed as an elegant modern gentleman. How wise that lawyer Cohen appeared. Sublime prophet. Infallible. And terrifyingly divine. With deep veneration I approached his desk, the sacred fire shone in his face. Immediately I felt its deep significance, in a direct way. Thanks, venerable master. I said with infinite humility. The austere hierophant, with sibilant tone, took his parabola and said, "That person referring to one of the two friends who waited for me outside is of the worn type, who will always live in poverty. The other person referring now to my other friend is of the Samuro type." How? Samuro? I repeat, Samuro. A fighting, spiritual friend, like the progressive Buddhist. Samurai of the Empire of the Rising Sun. Finally, addressing my insignificant, worthless person, said, "You are the military type, because you will have to draw the multitudes, and form the army of world salvation, to initiate the new Aquarian era." Then he proceeded in the following way, "Your specific mission is to create men, to teach the people to fabricate the astral, mental, and causal bodies so that they can incarnate the human soul." Then he got up from his desk with the evident purpose of looking for one of my books in his library, and when he had it in his hands, enraptured with ecstasy, said, "The book that you sent by mail at the appropriate time to a particular person was very much appreciated." It is easy to infer what happened afterwards. With infinite veneration and great humility, with no haste of any kind and no vain infatuation, I said goodbye to the venerable one and left the temple. Now it is urgent and indispensable to think and meditate seriously about the essential, basic nature of this story. Excluding from our vocabulary any cutting remark in bad taste, we shall emphasize the following postulate. It is indispensable to create the man inside ourselves, here and now. Since I am teaching the doctrine to the people, I am obviously a creator of men. There is a need to create inside us the availability for humanity. It is not superfluous to remember that the end time has already arrived. Much has been said in occultist literature about the two paths. I wish to refer specifically to the spiral and direct paths. Unquestionably, the two paths only open, augustly, before the authentic man, never before the intellectual animal. I will never be able to forget the final moments of the fifth initiation of fire. After all these processes of recapitulation, I had to confront bravely a nirvanic guardian, terrifyingly divine. The blessed Lord of Perfection, showing me the nirvanic spiral path, said, "This is a good work." Afterwards, indicating the direct path to me, said with his great voice like that of a roaring lion, "This is a superior work." Later on I saw him coming towards me with that tremendous commanding manner of the great majesties. He interrogated me, and I answered him, so we established the following dialogue. "Which of these two paths are you going to follow now?" "Let me think about it." "Do not think about it, say it immediately, define your position." "I will go by the direct path that leads to the absolute." "But what are you saying? Don't you realize that this path is very painful?" "I repeat, I go to the absolute." "How can you even think of entering there? Don't you want to understand the extent to which you are going to suffer?" "What's happening to you, sir?" "I will go to the absolute." "Well, you are warned." Those were the final words of the guardian, after which he withdrew, solemn. Another night, outside my supersensible bodies, in total command of functions as Atman or Spirit Man. In Nirvana, I was alone on the beautiful terrace of the dwelling of delights in the corner of love. I saw the inhabitants of that region in always increasing number floating in the sacred space. They happily sat down in that place full of perfumed flowers. Divine algorithm. Sublime inspiration and unforgettable talent. Atman Buddhimanis, Trimurti of perfection. At this moment in which I am writing these lines, it occurs to me to repeat that verse of the book The Occult Abode, that says, "I am the sacred crocodile Sebek. I am the flame with 3 wicks. And my wicks are immortal. I enter the region of Sikkim, and enter the region of the flames, that have vanquished my adversaries. An igneous creature started to talk in the name of the sacred brotherhood and said, "My brother, why are you going to take such a hard path? Here in Nirvana we are happy. Stay with us." Full of energy, my answer was the following: the intellectual animals were unable, with their temptations, far less you the gods. I go for the absolute. The ineffable ones went silent, and I quickly left that house. The voice of silence has said, the bodhisattva who renounces nirvana by love of humanity is confirmed as 3 times honored and, after many nirvanas won and lost because of this cause, he gets the right to enter the world of supernirvanic happiness. Nirvana has cycles of activity and others of deep rest. By the 20th century, it finds itself in a period of action. The nirvanis that reincarnated during the first races have reincarnated again. When this epoch has passed, they will submerge in the infinite happiness towards the future Mahammantra. The path of the long and bitter duty is different, implying total renunciation. However, it leads directly to the absolute. Any one of these many nights, finding myself happily in the state of Samadhi, I saw the planet Mars shine with purple hues. Its vibrations were certainly of a telepathic character. I felt in my quiet heart that I was being called urgently from the central nucleus of that planetary mass. Its glittering was unmistakable. Immediately I transported myself towards the living entrails of that world dressed into Soma Heliacon. Shining, dressed in the uniform of the celestial militias, Samael was waiting for me, my own individual monad, my intimate real being, and the divine regent of that planet. Reverent, I prostrated myself before the omniscient one, illustrious lord of that place, and then said, "Here I am, my father. What have you called me for? You, my son, forget me." "No, my father, I do not forget you." "Yes, my son, if you are given the role of gatekeeper of the universe, you forget me." "Oh, my father, I have come to kiss your hand and receive your blessing." The Omni-Merciful blessed me, and I kissed his right hand with bent knee. Later on, I fell into deep thoughts. Why did I choose this path for myself? Why did I forget my father before the terrible presence of the guardian of the paths? Jesus, the great Gnostic priest, gave us a great lesson in the Mount of Olives when he said, "My Father, if thou art willing, remove this cup from me, nevertheless not my will, but thine, be done." 18 years later, thundering and lightning I tore my garments protesting about so much pain. Oh, God. A virgin from the Nirvana answered me, "Such is the path you have yourself chosen. For us inhabitants of the Nirvana the triumphs are less, and because of this we suffer less. However, since your triumphs will be bigger, your suffering will be also more intense." When I wanted to rest a while, the agents of karma recriminated me, saying, "What is wrong, sir? Are you going to move? Move on, my friend. Move on. Move on." I patiently continued the march by the rocky path leading to the final liberation. Chapter 19. Persecutions. In the tropical slopes of the Sierra Nevada, near the Caribbean Sea, I had to recapitulate patiently the diverse initiatory esoteric processes of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th initiations of fire. I lived there in austerity with a certain group of select Gnostic students, very far from the fuss of vain intellectualism. Thankfully, these honest and irreproachable anchorites had built for me a simple dwelling using wood from those forests. I want to evoke now, at least for a moment, all those illustrious men, some of whom now excel as notable international missionaries. From my old Mexican land, I salute you, illustrious sons of the South American Sierra Nevada. I wish also to include in my salutations your wives and children, and the children of your children. How happy I was, staying in that refuge in the deep forest, far from worldly noise. I returned then to the elemental paradises of nature, and the princes of fire, air, water, and the perfumed earth gave me their secrets. One day, it does not matter which one, some of these people from Universal Gnosticism anxiously knocked on the door of my house to beg me to extinguish a fire. The unceasing crackling of the igneous element advanced terribly across the thick plantation, incinerating everything that it found in its path. This horrendous conflagration threatened the fields and the huts. In vain trenches were dug, hoping to stop the triumphal progress of the fire. The igneous element crossed over every ditch and gully, threatening all the surrounding fields and houses. Obviously, I had never been a firefighter or smoke eater, as these heroic public servants are kindly called. However, I frankly confess that at that instant the fate of these Gnostic brothers was in my hands. What to do? I yearned to serve them in the best possible way, and this was, without any doubt, one of my best opportunities. It would have been absurd and ungrateful to deny such urgent assistance. Karma is paid not only for the evil one does, but also for the good that one does not do when one is able to do it. Thus, I made up my mind to use magic. Getting closer to the titanic flare, I sat down next to it, and then I concentrated on the intimate. Secretly praying, I begged it to invoke Agni, the huge and illustrious god of fire. The intimate answered my prayer and cried out in a tremendous voice like that of a roaring lion, calling Agni, and 7 thunders repeated his voices. Promptly he was at my side, the brilliant lord of fire, the shining son of the flame, the omnicompassionate. I felt him present in all of my being, and I begged him to dissipate this fire in the name of universal charity. Undoubtedly, this blessed Lord of perfection considered my demand to be justified and perfect. In an unusual way, a soft and perfumed breeze appeared from the blue mystery of the deep forest, and it diverted the path of those tongues of fire, and then the fire was completely put out. Another day, when I was talking to the Gnostic people, in a clearing in the deep of the forest, very near the huts, we were suddenly threatened by torrential rain. Eagerly I concentrated upon the intimate, praying intensely and asking it to invoke Paralda, the elemental spirit of the restless sylphs of the air. That deva appeared, Olympic, with the evident purpose of helping me. I took advantage of the magnificent opportunity being offered, and I begged him to remove the stormy clouds from these surroundings. Truly, the clouds actually positioned themselves above our heads in the shape of a circle, and then went away, before the astonished mystics of that corner of love. At that time, the Gnostic brothers traveled each week to the sandy beaches of that stormy place. Lytolantes asked those sincere penitents to bring us fish and even vegetables and fruit that cannot be cultivated in the Sierra Nevada because of the ferocious hunger of the implacable ants. Those involutionary creatures ate insatiably flowers, fruits, and vegetables, and nothing could stop them. Such is the whirlpool of the forest. This is well known by the divines and the humans. The nocturnal patrols of the ants are frightful. The poisonous snakes, such as the dreadful Tala X and others known since classic times by the names of cascabel, coral, and manapa, thrived here, there, and everywhere. I still remember an old medicine man from the mountain, named Juan. This man lived with his wife in the deepest part of the forest. Like a good Samaritan from the Old Testament, that man cured with his precious balsams the humble mountain people bitten by the vipers. Unfortunately, he hated snakes, and implacable and vindictive, he killed them with no consideration whatsoever. Friend Juan, I told him one day, "You are in state of war against the vipers, and they are preparing to defend themselves. Let us see who wins the battle. I hate snakes. It would be better if you loved them. Remember that snakes are clairvoyant. The marvelous zodiac shines in the astral aura of these creatures, and they know, by direct experience, who truly loves them and who detests them. I cannot love them. I feel that my body starts decomposing when I see them. I kill any snake that crosses my way. Oh, good old man. 12 snakes have bitten you, and when the 13th hurts you, you will die." Somewhat later on, near his lonely hut, the old man was bitten by a frightful snake that, coiled 3.5 times, was waiting for him, hidden. The prophecy was fulfilled. The old medicine man died with the Arcanum 13 of the Kabbalah, and his friends could not find the poisonous snake. The old medicine man always carried in his haversack some marvelous plants. Let us remember the 5 lady captains: Captain Solabasta, Captain Generala, Captain Silvadora, Captain Pujadora, and Captain Tongue of Deer. Miraculous vegetables not classified by botany and only known in the Sierra Nevada, near the stormy waters of the Macuraiba. Extraordinary plants, by means of which the old medicine man of the lonely forest healed the victims of the snakes. Indeed, the old man used them therapeutically in a very wise way, prescribing them, sometimes in an oral form, as teas or infusions, or in an external form, having the wound or wounds washed with the decoction of such vegetables. The Gnostic recluses of the Sierra Nevada never killed the dangerous vipers. They learned to love them sincerely. As a consequence of this behavior, they gained the confidence of the terrible snakes. Now, these poisonous serpents have become guardians of the temple. When these anchorites of the mountain wished to move the snakes away, they sang full of faith the following mantras: Osi, Osoha, Asi. Every time that those hermits wanted truly, magically, to charm the terrible snakes, they said the mysterious words, Osi, Osoha, Osies. No mystic from that mountain ever took the life of any snake. They learned to respect every existence, even though there are exceptions. Such is the case of the precious rattlesnake, Cancer. In the name of the truth, I want to establish in this book the following fact: the infallible cure for the fearful cancer has been discovered, and can found in the serpent rattlesnake. Formula of salvation: kill this animal, get rid of the rattles and head, those parts are not useful. Mince the useful meat until it is reduced to a fine powder. Put this substance into empty capsules that can be found in any pharmacy. Dosage: take 1 capsule every hour. Observation: continue the treatment until radical healing takes place. Warning: the sick person must radically eliminate all medicines and limit himself exclusively to the treatment with the viper. Hawks. At this moment come to mind wild reminiscences, recollections from the mountains, wild memories. How those penitents suffered from the cruel birds of prey. The sharp-eyed hawks laid waste the farmyards, taking away in their claws the chickens and the hens. I saw many times these bloodthirsty birds standing on the branches of the trees of the neighborhood, lying in wait for their defenseless victims. To eat and be eaten is the law of the eternal autoegocratic common cosmic trogo, the reciprocal feeding of all organisms. Unquestionably, such a reciprocity, correspondence, or mutuality appears because of the active omnipresent element Okidnok. Persecutions. How happily we lived in our huts in the lonely forest. Unluckily, new persecutions started. Profane people from the neighborhood villages began propagating various slanderous lies against me. The gossiping of the ladies, the lies of the gentlemen, the deceits assumed monstrous shapes and started a tempest. In fact, I became the central character of the drama, against whom all sparks, flashes, were thrown. Things were going from bad to worse every day, and at last the accuser, the informer, appeared. Having been alerted, the police looked for me everywhere with express orders to apply the law of flight. Certainly, I was not for these poor gendarmes a simple agitator in the style of Paul of Tarsus, but something worse, a sorcerer from the Avern coming straight from some mysterious witch's Sabbath, a monster that must be jailed or killed. On a starry night, finding myself in a state of ecstasy, I was visited by a Mahatma, who told me, "A large contingent of armed people is looking for you. You must leave by a different road." I must emphasize the fact that I always know how to obey the orders of the Universal White Brotherhood. Taking advantage of the silent night, I went down the mountain by a steep and difficult path. In the plain, as the Gnostic people called the coastal lands, away from the mountains, the venerable Master Garga Kichins picked me up. He took me in his carriage to a beautiful city. Chapter 20. The secret of the abyss. Humbly, frankly, now I must confess that after having climbed the 5 steps of the igneous initiations, it became urgent for me to pursue the development in the light with the 8 degrees of the Venusian initiation. It becomes pressing to work in the fiery forge of Vulcan, sex, when one truly requires the complete awakening of the first serpent of light. The following is written in golden words in the Book of All Splendors, The Kundalini develops, revolves, and ascends in the marvelous aura of the Mahakahen. Unquestionably, we first work with the fire and then with the light. We must never confuse the serpents of fire with the vipers of light. The extraordinary ascent of the first serpent of light towards the interior and upper regions along the medullar spinal canal of the physical body enabled me to know the secret of the abyss. The foundations of this secret can be found in the law of the fall, as formulated by Saint Vinoma. This is the formulation given by this master of this cosmic law, discovered by him. Everything existing in the world fall towards the bottom. And the bottom, for any part of the universe, is its nearest stability, and this said stability is the place or the point upon which all lines of force arriving from all directions converge. The centers of all the suns and all the planets of our universe are just such points of stability. They are the lowest points of those regions of space upon which the forces from all directions of the given part of the universe definitely tend. In these points there is also concentrated the equilibrium which enables suns and planets to maintain their position. The Tiger of Turkestan, commenting, says, in this formulation of his, Saint Vinoma said further that everything when dropped into space, wherever it may be, they tend to fall on one or another sun, or another planet, according to which sun or planet the given part of space belongs to, where the object is dropped, each sun or planet being for that particular sphere, the stability or bottom. These paragraphs in quotation marks refer clearly to the two aspects, external and internal, of the law of gravity. The external aspect is only a projection of the internal 1 inch. In a three-dimensional form, the secret gravitation of the spheres is repeated. The central nucleus of this planetary mass in which we live is doubtless the mathematical place or point where all lines of force coming from diverse directions converge. The involutive and evolutive forces of nature can be found at the center of planetary stability, where they reciprocally equilibrate. Essential surges start their evolution in the mineral rain, continue in the vegetable state and then in the animal scale, and at last reach the level of the intellectual humanoid type. Surges of life descend soon, involuting according to the law of the fall, reviving animal, vegetable, and mineral processes, towards the terrestrial center of gravity. The wheel of samsara turns, on the right-hand side ascends evoluting Anubis, on the left involuting Typhon descends. The sojourn in the intellectual humanoid state is something completely relative and circumstantial. Justly, we have been told that any one of the humanoid periods always consists of 108 lives of evolutive and involutive type that are always processed and repeated, be it in an elevated or in a lower type of spiral. I clarify, 108 existences are always assigned to each rational humanoid period. These keep a strict mathematical concordance with the same number of beads that constitute the necklace of the Buddha. After each humanoid epoch, according to the laws of time, space, and movement, the wheel of the Arcanum 10 of the Tarot inevitably turns. Then, it is obvious and manifest that the surges of involuting life descend into the mineral kingdom submerged towards the center of planetary stability, to ascend again evolutively somewhat later on. Any new evolutive reascension from the terrestrial center of gravity requires the previous disintegration of the ego. This is the second death. Since the essence is bottled up in the ego, its dissolution becomes indispensable so that the essence is liberated. The original pristine purity of the essence is restored at the center of planetary stability. The wheel of samsara turns 3,000 times. If we really yearn for the final liberation, it really is imperative and urgent to understand this, to capture its deep significance. Continuing the present chapter, it is necessary to call the attention of the reader to the following. When the 3,000 periods of the Great Wheel are over, any type of intimate self-realization becomes impossible. In other words, it is necessary to assert the inescapable fact that each monad is assigned mathematically 3,000 periods for his deep interior self-realization. It is indubitable that the doors close after the last turn of the wheel. When this happens, the monad, the immortal spark, our real being, collects its essence and its principles to absorb itself definitively in the bosom of the universal spirit of life, the supreme Parabrahman. It is written in the testament of ancient wisdom with mysterious characters of fire the concrete, clear and definitive fact that there are very few divine monads or virginal sparks that really want to achieve mastery. When a monad really yearns for mastery, it is indubitable that it obtains it by working intensively on its essence. It is very easy to recognize in the world of the dense shapes every essence that is being intimately worked inwards by its divine monad. This is the concrete case of any person with great spiritual restlessness. Obviously, such a specific type of mystical longing could never exist in people whose essence had not been worked inwards by its corresponding divine monad. Once, being on holiday in the seaside town of Acapulco in the Pacific coast of Mexico, I had to go into the yogic state of nirvikalpa samadhi. I wanted to know something about those monads that, after having endured the 3,000 turns of the wheel of samsara, had lost every cosmic opportunity. What I saw on that occasion, far from the body, from the feelings in the mind, was extraordinary. Totally submerged in the current of the sound, in the shining ocean of the supreme Parabrahmanatman, I came in by the doors of an ineffable temple. It was not necessary to interrogate and investigate. I could feel the enormous reality of such sublime monads in my whole being. They are beyond good and evil. Very small innocent creatures, flashes of the divinity without self-realization. Happy beings, but without mastery. Those noble creatures floated deliciously in the immaculate whiteness of the great ocean. They came into the temple or went out, prayed and kneeled down before the Buddhas, before the holy gods, before the Mahatmas. Unquestionably, such divine monads see the masters in the same way that ants look up to people. The Agnis Vedas, the Buddhas of compassion, the Hierophants, are for this type of monads without mastery something that cannot be understood, strange, enigmatic beings, terrifyingly divine. In the sanctas or churches of the free life in their movement, these monads obey the holy gods and serve them with infinite humility. The enjoyment of these monads is very well merited, because the essence of each of them has known the horrors of the abyss and turned 3,000 times in the wheel of samsara. In each one of the multiple cyclic turns of the samsara wheel are included multiple evolutive processes through the mineral, vegetal, animal, and humanoid kingdoms. Each one of the 3.000 fatal turns of such will means in fact terrible descendant involutions towards the planetary center of stability, going down slowly through the humanoid, animal, vegetal, and mineral steps. Specifying real facts, we emphasize the following. 3,000 descents from the planetary gravity center. 3,000 descents to the planetary gravity center. 3,000 times going up from the hard rock to the rational animal. 3,000 times going down from the rational humanoid to the stone. 3,000 times of repetition and failure in the 108 cycles of human lives. Undoubtedly that those divine monads excluded from the mastery because of intentional rejection or because they failed despite all their efforts, suffered very much in this painful valley of Samsara and in the Pluto's dwelling, the submerged mineral kingdom. This last fact is showing the infinite divine mercy and gives a sense to the elemental happiness that such monads enjoy between the universal spirit of life. Chapter 21. The Baptism of John. The second degree of the Venusian initiation, the superior octave of its corresponding initiation of fire, transcendentally appeared as an esoteric result of the miraculous ascent of the radiant second serpent of light towards the interior and upper regions by the medullar spinal canal of the vital organic reserve, Lingam Sarira. It certainly was an unexpected, magic encounter as the one I had with John in the Garden of the Hesperides, where the rivers with the pure water of life flow with milk and honey. I wish to refer with great solemnity to the Baptist, living reincarnation of Elias, that colossus that lived in the roughness of the Carmelos mountain having for company the vicinity of wild beasts, and from where he used to emerge as lighting to sink and raise kings. Superhuman creature, sometimes visible, other times invisible, which was respected until death. Clearly, the esoteric divine baptism of the Christus John has very deep archaic roots. It is appropriate to remember in this paragraph the baptism of Rama, the Christ yogi of the Hindustan. When they were at a half yajna from the southern bank of the river Sarayu, Visvamitra said sweetly, Rama, it is convenient that you throw water over yourself, according to our rites. I am going to teach you our greetings so as not to waste any time. First receive those two marvelous sciences, the potency and the ultrapotency. They will prevent tiredness, old age, or any other injury from invading your limbs. Having finished this speech, Visvamitra, the man of the mortifications, initiated Rama, who was already purified in the waters of the river and was standing up, the head inclined and the hands together, into the two sciences. This is a text from the Ramayana, and it invites the good Christians to meditate. The adamantine baptismal foundation can unquestionably be found in the Sahaja Maithuna, sexual magic. It was urgent that full information on sex yoga was given to the candidate before receiving the baptismal waters. Rama had to be informed in advance by Visvamitra before being baptized. In this way he got to know the sciences of the potency and ultrapotency. The key to the baptism can be found in the scientific transmutation of the spermatic waters of the first instant. The baptismal sacrament is in itself full of a deep meaning. It is in fact a sexual commitment. To become baptized is thus equivalent, in fact, to signing a pact of sexual magic. Rama knew how to fulfill this terrible agreement. He practiced the Sahaja Maithuna with his priestess wife. Rama transmuted the seminal waters into the wine of light of the alchemist, and at the end he found the lost word, the Kundalini having become the logos, flowered in his fertile lips. Then he was able to say with all the strength of his soul, the king is dead, long live the king. In the presence of the Christus John the First could feel in my whole cosmic being the deep meaning of baptism. The Nazarenes are known as Baptists, Sabaeans, and Christians of St. John. Their belief was that the Messiah was not the Son of God, but simply a prophet that wanted to follow John. Origen, Volume 2, page 150, observes that there are some that say of John the Baptist that he was the Anointed One, Christus. When the metaphysical conceptions of the Gnostics, that saw in Christ the Logos and the Anointed One, started to gain terrain, the primitive Christians, separated from the Nazarenes, who accused Jesus of perverting the doctrines of John and exchanging the baptism on the Jordan with another one. Codex Nazareus, page 109. I will conclude this chapter emphasizing the following. When the second serpent of light made contact with the atom of the Father in the magnetic field at the root of the nose, the Christ Son shone over the waters of life and the initiatory final ceremony took place. Let the blessings from Amenzano, with their inalterability, be for all eternity. Amen. Chapter 22. The Transfiguration of Jesus. The luminous ascent of the third serpent of light towards the interior and upper regions by the shining medullary canal of the sidereal body gave me open access to the superior Venusian octave of the corresponding initiation of fire. It is not possible to write in the narrow frame of this treatise everything that I learned years ago in each and all of the 33 holy chambers. The extraordinary revolution of the radiant third snake was processed very slowly according to the merits of the quiet heart. When the shining viper crossed the threshold of the third secret chamber of the heart temple, I obviously felt transfigured. Is this, perhaps, something very rare? Didn't the same thing happen to Moses in Mount Nebo? Unquestionably, I am not the first to whom this happens, and neither I am the last. At this moment of happiness, I was transported before the presence of that illustrious man of celebrated intelligence and noble face that I knew in days gone by when I was only a tender adolescent. I wish to refer to the professor of aspirants to the Rosicrucian order referred to in Chapter 5 of this same treatise. Unfortunately, this notable man could not see me even in full transfiguration. Those who consider themselves Christians have never meditated enough on the moving and sublime scene of the transfiguration of Jesus, nor on his ascension, as it is described by Luke 9-18:37, in the following terms. Now it happened that as he was praying alone, the disciples were with him, and he asked them, Who do the people say that I am? And they answered, John the Baptist, Ioannes, or the Lamb of God. But others say, Elijah, and others, that one of the old prophets has risen. And he said to them, But who do you say that I am? And Peter answered, The Christ of God. But he charged and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, The Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And he said to all, If any man would come after me, let him deny himself, dissolve the ego, and take up his cross daily, practice sexual magic, and follow me, sacrifice for humanity. For whoever would save his life, the selfish person who never sacrifices himself for his fellow men, will lose it, and whoever loses his life, the altruist that mounts the altar of the supreme sacrifice for humanity, for my sake, he will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. But I tell you truly, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God. And after this passage, that taken literally refers only to Jesus, but when taken symbolically or in the spirit refers in fact to every man. As we shall see further on, the text continues with the scene from the Transfiguration, saying, Now about 8 days after these sayings, and as if the fact to be described were, we add, a practical and tangible corroboration of them, he took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his countenance was altered, and his raiment became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men talked with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, which he was to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and those who were with him were heavy with sleep, but kept awake, and they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. And as the men were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is well that we are here. Let us make 3 booths. One for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah, not knowing what he said. As he said this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud, saying, This is my Son, my chosen, listen to him. And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silence and told no one in those days anything of what they had seen. Chapter 23. Jerusalem. The extraordinary development, revolution, and ascent of the 4th Venusian. Serpent towards the interior and upper regions along the medullary canal of the mental body allowed me to experience vitally the whole of the raw evangelic realism of the magisterial entrance of the great Kabir Jesus in Jerusalem. Then I could verify by myself in a direct manner the inferior, hell, and superior, heaven, aspects of the mental world. Unquestionably that great harlot of all fatalities, the apocalyptic great whore, whose number is 666, involutes horrifyingly in the mental hells. I am not a treacherous iconoclast devoted to the destruction of cherished ideals like an intellectual vandal. However, I must confess sincerely to everything that I saw in those regions of nature. What I perceived with the spatial sense in the mental hells had been stated already by St. John, Indiana, the Apocalypse. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore, cargo of gold, silver, jewels and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk and scarlet, all kinds of scented wood, all articles of ivory, all articles of costly wood, bronze, iron and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots and slaves, that is, human souls. Horrible buildings and beds of procusto, where the great whore fornicates unceasingly. Abominable brothels, repugnant streets, caverns where pornographic movies are being shown, etc., etc., etc. When one wishes to enter in triumph into the Jerusalem above, the heaven of Mercury, and after that the world of the spirit, it is indispensable to go beyond the body, the affections, and the mind. Let us look now at chapter 21 of Matthew, verses 1 to 20. When Jesus came near Jerusalem and reached Bethphage at the Mount Olives, he sent out 2 disciples, saying to them, Go to the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey hitched and a colt with her. Unhitch them and bring them to me. Should anyone say anything to you, you reply, The Lord needs them, and without delay he will let them go. This happened so that the saying of the prophet might be fulfilled. Tell Zion's daughter, Behold, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, symbol of the mind, even on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. The disciples went and did as Jesus the great Kabir had directed them. They brought the ass and the colt, and put their garments on them, and he sat thereon. Most of the crowd spread their garments on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road, esoteric. And the crowds that went before him on the path of the razor's edge, and that followed him in the esoteric path, shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And when he entered Jerusalem, the entire city was stirred, saying, Who is this? And the crowd said, This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee. And Jesus entered the temple of God, the temple which each of us carries inside, and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple, the merchants, the eyes that personify our defects of a psychological type, and he overturned the tables of the money changers, demons who adulterate everything that is good, and the chairs of those who sold doves, devils who sell the third logos, who trade desecrating the Holy Ghost, fornicators, prostitutes, lesbians, homosexuals. He said to them, It is written, My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers. In this way the mind of each person is a lair for perversity. And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them, people who are incapable of seeing the truth and subjects that cannot follow the path. But when the chief priests and the scribes, or intellectuals, saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were indignant, and they said to him, Do you hear what these are saying? And Jesus said to them, Yes, have you never read, Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings thou hast brought perfect praise? And leaving them, he went out of the city to Bethany, and lodged there. In the morning, as he was returning to the city, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the wayside, symbol of the sexual force, he went to it and found nothing on it but leaves only. And he said to it, May no fruit ever come from you again. And the fig tree withered at once. When the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, How did the fig tree wither at once? It is written in burning coal on the book of splendors, Tree that yields no fruit is cut and used for firewood. When Adam and Eve, the paradisiac humanity, ate from the forbidden fruit, their eyes were opened and they realized that they were naked. They then sewed fig leaves and made aprons for themselves. Gautama Buddha, seated for 4 days and their nights in deep meditation under the shadow of a fig tree, attained the final illumination. In the old Egypt of the pharaohs, the fig tree was always venerated as a living symbol of the creative energy of the third logos. The involutionary creatures of the hell worlds certainly are sterile fig trees that never yielded any fruit. Something strange can be written about this evergreen fig tree, because one of the most typical details, concomitant with certain astral visions, is of a plant that is always green and rotates giddily. A good friend from Jamila tells me, just outside this village there is a cave of large width and height, where a fig tree grows that never loses a leaf or yields fruits. It is a general belief, supported by the testimony of several who say that they have seen it, that on the day of St. John, when the day dawns, from this cave goes out a great military cohort of specters with war horses richly harnessed. Warriors who, preceded by fantastic banners, go towards the south, disappearing far away, as if they were evoking a distant historical fact. This is textual from the Tree of the Hesperides. Jesus, the great Gnostic priest, said, The stone, philosophers, the sex, that was rejected by those who were building, people of many religions, was made into a cornerstone. Because the Lord has done this, and it is a marvelous thing before our eyes. Therefore, I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken from you and will be given to people that gets results from it, people who are capable of practicing sexual magic, to dissolve the ego and sacrifice for their fellow creatures. And he who falls on this stone, the sex, will be crushed, and on whom it falls will be crumbled. Unquestionably, only by means of the sexual fire is it possible to burn out all the perverse psychic aggregates that we have inside us, to enter the celestial Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. See my book entitled The Mystery of the Golden Blossom. Chapter 24. The Mount of Olives. The marvelous ascent of the fifth serpent of light towards the interior and upper regions along the medullary spinal canal of the causal body gave me in fact free access to the initiatory mysteries of the fifth degree of the Venusian wisdom. If I were to write in detail everything that I learned then in the 33 holy chambers of the causal world, it is obvious that I would fill an enormous volume. As a causal man, seated with much humility, I crossed my arms over my chest to attend the final ceremony. Unfortunately, I had the atrocious habit of crossing the arms in such a way that the left arm was over the right one. "You should not cross your arms in this way," an adept of the temple said, and then he added, "The right arm must be over the left." I obeyed his indications. Have you ever seen Egyptian sarcophagi? The arms of the dead people crossed over their chests illustrate these assertions. A skull between two shin bones as a signal of danger tells the same story. To do the will of the Father in heaven as it is on earth, to die in the Lord, is the deep meaning of this symbol. The great Kabir Jesus, in the Mount of Olives, prayed thus, "Father, if thou art willing, remove this cup from me, nevertheless not my will, but thine be done." And being in an agony he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down upon the ground. And when he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleep for sorrow, with the consciousness asleep, and he said to them, "Why do you sleep? Why do you have your consciousness asleep? Rise and pray that you may not enter into temptation. Because it is clear that those that sleep are falling into temptation." 10. In truth, I tell you that your consciousness must always be alert and vigilant as a watchman in times of war. It is written, "Before the cock, the word, crows, or is incarnated in us, you will deny me 3 times. When the Hierophant Peter forgot himself, he denied the intimate Christ 3 times. Peter, Petra o stone, was the actual Hierophant interpreter in Phoenician from which the famous evangelic sentence has its origin, "You are Peter, and on this stone I will build my church." 11-foot, our interior temple. Bunsen, in his The Place of Egypt in Universal History, Volume 5, p. 90, comments in turn on the inscription found in a sarcophagus of a great queen of the 11th dynasty, 2250 years BC, which is just a transcription of the Book of the Dead. 4500 years BC, interpreting hieroglyphs of Peter, revelation, initiation, etc., etc., etc. The ancient medieval alchemists made no mistakes when they discovered the initiatory stone in our sexual organs. Unquestionably, to spill the vase of Hermes, to prostitute the stone of truth, is equivalent to denying the Christ. From the all-unknowable or radical zero emanates, at the beginning of a manifestation or universe, the Pythagorical monad, the logos, the archmagus or hierophant, the one only, the Buddhist Anandad, the Chaldean Ein Sof, En Sof or Pneumoicon, the Ruach Elohim or divine spirit of the Lord floating over the generating waters, the existent by himself, Anupadaka, or Aryan Manuspadambu Narayana. This, the particular monad of each of us, is transformed into the most sublime duality, our particular, individual divine mother Kundalini. Him and her are actually the Gnostic Father-Mother, the Parsi Ziruana, the dual protogonos or Adam Kadmon, the Theoskeos of the Theogony by Hesiod, the Chaldean Uranus or fire and water, the Egyptian Osiris Isis, the Jehovah, the Semitic Jehovah or Iadhev, etc., etc., etc. The word Rome 12 has as inverse the word love 13. The sacrament of the Church of Love or Rome is the Sahajamethuna, sexual magic. We must learn to carry out this holy sacrament, vibrating in tune with the divine couple. He must become the live expression of the Hebraic Ayad, she must be the live manifestation of Hev. The Kabbalist Adam Kadmon, the Areche Sapphira or eternal masculine-feminine harmonizing perfectly above and below, in the infinitely large and in the infinitely small, constitutes the culminating note of the Mount of Olives. Chapter 25. The Beautiful Helen. The sublime and marvelous ascent of the radiant sixth serpent towards interior and upper regions along the medullary spinal canal of the Buddhic body gave me in fact and by right free access to the sixth Venusian initiation. In the Buddhic or intuitional universal world, I experienced at that time some Transcendental chapters of the Christian Gospel. I wish to refer now, with the utmost delicacy, to certain secret, marvelous passages, intentionally eliminated from the original text by the scribes and doctors of the law. It is certainly deplorable that the Hebraic Holy Bible has been so cruelly mutilated, adulterated, deformed. What I experienced then in the intuitional cosmic region has multiple perfect rhythmic concordances with the diverse esoteric initiatory processes that we must experience here and now. Extraordinary scenes related to the other planets of the solar system of ores, in which we live, move and have our being. When the shining sixth viper of light crossed the august threshold of its corresponding chamber in the quiet heart, the sun of midnight shone gloriously in the unalterable infinite. I came into the temple of initiation accompanied by many people. Each one of us in the procession carried in our right hand a candle or a burning torch. At that moment I felt I was living those esoteric, Christian verses that to the letter say, and immediately, while Jesus was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs, from the chief priests, that is, men constituted by worldly authority, the scribes, that is, those considered as wise by the world, and the elders, those considered by the world as prudent, sensible, and discreet. And when Judas, the demon of desire, came, he went up to him at once, and said, Master. And he kissed him. And they laid hand on Jesus and seized him. 14. Intoxicated with ecstasy, I cried, I am the Christ. A lady adept warned me, saying, Look out. Do not say that, it shows lack of respect. At this moment I am representing him, I answered. The sacred lady kept then a respectful silence. The cosmic drama in the temple of the transparent walls had a certain majestic feeling, very serious, terrifyingly divine. Converted into the central character, I had to experience in myself the following evangelic passages, and they took Jesus to the house of the high priest Caiaphas, the demon of the ill will, where the chief priests, the official authorities of this world, the elders, the very respectable people who have much experience, and the scribes, the intellectuals, were assembled. Now the chief priests and the whole council sought testimony against Jesus, the eternal Savior, to put him to death, but they found none. For many bore false witness against him, and their witness did not agree. And some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, We heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, referring to the animal body, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands, the spiritual body, the tesoma heliakon. Yet not even so did their testimony agree. And the high priest, with his ill will, stood up in the midst, and asked Jesus, Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But he was silent and made no answer. Silence is the eloquence of wisdom. Again the high priest asked him, Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? The second logos, and Jesus said, I am, he is, and you will see the Son of Man, every person truly Christified or Osirified, sitting at the right hand of power, the first logos, and coming with the clouds of heaven. And the high priest, the demon of ill will, tore his mantle, and said, Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision? And they all condemned him as deserving death. And some began to spit on him, and to cover his face, and to strike him, saying to him, Prophesy. And the guards received him with blows. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests, with the elders and scribes, and the whole council held a consultation, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. And Pilate, the demon of the mind, asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, You have said so, and the chief priests, the authorities of this world, accused him of many things. And Pilate again asked him, Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you. Everybody accuses the intimate Christ, even by those that call themselves his disciples. But Jesus, the intimate Christ, made no further answer. I repeat, silence is the eloquence of wisdom. Pilate, the demon of the mind, wondered. Now at the feast he used to release for them one prisoner whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison, who had committed murder in the insurrection, because the ego is always homicidal and wicked, there was a man called Barabbas, the demon of perversity that everyone carries inside. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he was wont to do for them. And he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests, the authorities of all kinds, had delivered him up. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. The authorities of every type defend the ego. They say, first eye, second eye, third eye. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man whom you call the King of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him, crucifix, crucifix, crucifix." 15. Ecstatic, I left the ineffable sancta after having experienced in a direct form the tremendous, intimate realism of all these verses cited above. Dressed in a new tunic of glory, brilliant clothing, I left the great cathedral of the soul. How happy I felt contemplating from there the ample panorama. I saw then the flow, back and forth, of all things. The booty is like a fine and transparent vase of alabaster, inside which burns the flame of prana. Atman, the being, has two souls. The first is the spiritual soul, and it is feminine, booty. The second is the human soul, and is masculine, superior manas. The intellectual animal wrongly called man only has the essence incarnated inside himself. In fact, this is the buddhata, a minimal fraction of the human soul, the psychic material with which one can and should fabricate the golden embryo. See the mystery of the golden blossom. The origin and basis of high magic can be found in the perfect marriage of Buddhi Manas, be it in the purely spiritual regions or in the terrestrial world. Helen clearly symbolizes the marriage of the nous, Atman Buddhi, with Manas, the human soul or causal body. By means of this union consciousness and will can be identified, and both souls are thus given divine powers. The essence of Atman, the primordial, eternal and universal divine fire, can be found contained inside the Buddhi, which in full conjunction with the causal Manas, human soul, determine the masculine-feminine. The beautiful Helen of Troy is the same Helen of the Faust by Goethe, the Shakti, or feminine potency of the internal being. He and she, Buddhi Manas, are the twin souls inside ourselves, even if the intellectual animal as yet does not have them incarnated, the two adorable daughters of Atman, the intimate, the husband and wife eternally in love. Such love has an infinite number of correlations, be it in the conjugate pairs of the double suns of the sky, in the earth and the moon, in the protoplasmic control mechanism of the cells, determining, as it is well known, the mysterious phenomenon of morphological duplication of a cell, in the universal symbolism of the epics and all of the related literature, where the ideal love between two beings of the opposite sex are the alma mater of the literary production. Unquestionably, the Sahaja Maithuna, as a sacrament of the Church of Rome, is repeated with the twins of the Akasha Tattva, and is continued gloriously as Osiris Isis in the religion of Anupadaka. I clarify this, when we refer to the Church of Rome, Roma in Spanish, put the letters the other way around and rate it thus, amor, love in Spanish. Obviously, sex is the Church of Love. The theory of the twin souls does not imply any danger whatsoever when we understand its deep meaning. The chemical coitus, the metaphysical copulation, shines gloriously in the zenith of the ideal without the least shadow of impurity. The legitimate falling in love is never separated from sex. The sexual act certainly achieves the consubstantiality of love in the psychophysiological realism of our nature. The marriage Buddhi Manas is only possible by means of the chemical coitus. Sexual enjoyment is a legitimate right of man. Renato committed the grave error of affirming, in an emphatic manner, that the Helen of Simon Magus was a beautiful woman of flesh and blood found by the Magus in a brothel in Tyre, and who, according to his biographers, was the reincarnation of the Greek Helen. Such concept does not resist a deep analysis. The authentic initiatory schools teach, with complete clarity, that the beautiful Helen is the Buddhi, the spiritual soul of the sixth Venusian initiation, the Shakti feminine potential. Chapter 26. The event of Golgotha. The radiant ascent of the seventh Venusian serpent towards the interior and upper regions along the spiritual medullary spinal canal of the divine vehicle, Atman, permitted me to experience vividly the event of Golgotha. Unquestionably, I need to confess frankly the concrete, clear and definitive fact that I saw myself converted into the central character of the cosmic drama. It turns out to be something extraordinary, to experience in myself the cosmic event of the Calvary, with all the rough transcendental realism of the world of the divine spirit, Atman. I am not the first to experience vividly the event of the Mount of the Skulls, neither will I be the last. And I saw myself after the crucifixion, spread out like a corpse on the ground. Then the potential Shakti, the divine wife of Shiva, my perfect mother Kundalini, prostrated with infinite humility, adored me. "Oh, my mother," I said. "You are my mother. It is I who should kneel before you. It is not possible that you should bend your knee before me. I do not deserve this. I am a base worm made of mud of the earth, a sinner, very low." However, it is evident that at such moments of the cosmic drama I represented the Christus, Vishnu, the second Logos, the Sun. While I write these sheets, it comes to my recollection that ineffable prayer of Dante Alighieri, that says textually, "Virgin Mother, daughter of your Son, the humblest as well as the highest of all creatures, fixed end of the eternal will, you are the one who has a noble human nature in such a way that your Maker did not disdain to become his own work. In your bosom love was inflamed, whose heat has made germinate this flower in the eternal peace. You are here, for us, meridian sun of charity, and below, for the mortals, live spring of hope. You are magnificent, lady, and worth so much, that everybody who wishes to obtain a grace and does not ask you, really wants his wish to fly without wings. Your kindness not only helps those who implore you, but many times it forestalls the pleading spontaneously. In you are joined together the forgiveness, the piety, the magnificence and everything good that exists in a creature. Unquestionably, each being has his own original, particular, individual divine mother Kundalini. This one, therefore, who has up to now seen one by one all spiritual existences from the deepest pool of the universe, asks you to grant him the grace to acquire such virtue so that he can raise himself with the eyes to the supreme health. And I, who have never wished to see more than I wish him to see, I address to you all my prayers, and I beg you that they not be in vain, so that you can dissipate with yours all the fogs due to his mortal condition, so that he can contemplate openly the supreme pleasure. Oh, Queen, who can do whatever you wish to do. I also beg you that you can serve pure his feelings after seeing so much, that your custody triumphs over the impulses of the human passion 16. Up to hear this sublime dantesque prayer. Let us continue now with the subject of this chapter. Let us study some Christic verses. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe upon him. The philosophical stone is first black, then white and finally red, and plaiting a crown of thorns they put it on his head, the traditional painful diadem on every Christified astral body, and put a reed in his right hand, like the wand of Aaron or the rod of the patriarchs, living symbol of the spine. And kneeling before him they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spat upon him, and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, because such is this path of the sex, they stripped him of the robe, because they, the sinister ones, never want the initiate to dress in the purple of his intimate logoi, and put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. As they were marching out, they came upon a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. This man they compelled to carry his cross. The Guru always appears on the way to help us. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull, synonym of death, they offered him wine to drink, mingled with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. It is evident that the path of the razor's edge is very bitter. And when they had crucified him, with sexual cross, because the phallus inserted into the uterus forms such a sacred sign, they divided his garments among them by casting lots, clear reference to the elimination of human possessions. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus the King of the Jews, Inri Ignis." Natura renovator integram, fire renews nature unceasingly. Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. Good thief, the divine secret power that steals the sexual energy for Christification. Bad thief, the secret enemy who with evil purposes steals the deposit of sexual hydrogen C12. And those who passed by, the usual profaners and desecrators, derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, you, who annihilate the atom of sin so that the celestial Adam is born, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross, because the sinister ones do not like the insertion of the crossbeam that form your 2 arms, like 2 huge hands, that extend to scare away the sinister forces and the inferior powers. So also the chief priests, the authorities, with the scribes, or intellectuals, and the Pharisees, that always pretend to be virtuous and holy, and the elders, very respectable people of the world, mocked him, saying, He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel, let him come down now from the cross, if he abandons the path of the razor's edge and the Sahajamethuna, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God, let God deliver him now, if he desires him, for he said, I am the Son of God. He Christified himself, and therefore became Son of the Eternal. We are sons of the devil, because we are the fruits of fornication. And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Now from the 6th hour, temptation, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. 9th sphere. Adding up Kabbalistically, we have 9 plus 6 equals 15. This is the arcanum of Tiphon Bahamut, the devil. Such an esoteric value corresponds to the constellation of the whale, under whose cosmic influence the initiate develops until reaching the resurrection. Let us remember the signal of Jonas. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Then I, that is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? In fact, before the resurrection every initiate feels really abandoned. And some of the bystanders hearing it said, This man is calling Elijah. Helios, Eliu, Elijah, Helios, the Christ Son, the intimate logoi, is our supreme aspiration. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed, symbol of the spine, and gave it to him to drink, like saying, The work with the spinal sexual fires is more bitter than gall. But the others said, Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. In this way we, the initiates, die in ourselves with death on the cross. See my book entitled The Mystery of the Golden Blossom. And behold, the curtain of the temple, the famous veil of Isis or sexual veil of Adam, product of the original sin, was torn in 2, due to the supreme death of the ego, and the earth shook and the stones, from the path of the razor's edge, were split. Chapter 27. The Holy Sepulchre. It is written with characters of fire in the Book of Splendors that when Jesus the Gnostic great priest exhaled his last breath, the philosophical earth, his very human person, trembled on understanding the difficult task that destiny had reserved for him, and the stones of the path of the razor's edge cracked and the path became even more difficult. This is only understood integrally by those masters who, after having died to themselves, are prepared for the resurrection. Mercury, as an astrological planet, is much more mysterious than even Venus is, and identical to the Mazdian Mitra, the Buddha, the genie or god situated between the sun and the moon, the perpetual companion of the Son of Wisdom. Pausanias, in his book V, shows him to us sharing an altar with Jupiter. He showed wings, to express his assistance to the sun in its course, and was called the Nuncio and the Wolf of the Sun, Solaris Luminis Particeps. He was the leader and the one who evokes the souls, the Archmagus and Hierophant. Virgil describes him taking his caduceus or hammer to call up again to life those unhappy souls fallen in the orco or limbo. Tum virgum capit, hac animus il evocat orco, with the sane purpose of making them join the celestial militia. After these explanations, the following verses become clear. And the earth shook, the rocks were split, the tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep, and were in the orcus or limbo, were raised, and coming out of the tombs, after their esoteric resurrection, after his resurrection, they went into the holy city, the superior Jerusalem, and appeared to many. Unquestionably, many saints have wanted to self-realize intimately without the holy sacrament of the Church of Love, Sahaja Methuna. These unhappy souls always fall into the orko, or limbo of ignorance, darkness, and pain. Only by dying in oneself, with the death on the cross a symbol which is totally sexual, the resurrection then possible. If the germ does not die, the plant is not born. The path of life is formed with the footprints of the hooves of the horse of death. Mercury is the golden planet, the ineffable one, that which the Hierophants forbid naming, and it is symbolized in the Greek mythology by the famous guardian dogs of the celestial herd that drink from the pure fountains of the occult wisdom. Mercury is also Hermes Anubis, the good inspirer or Agatha demon. As bird of Argos, he keeps watch over the earth, where he is wrongly mistaken by the sun itself. They are the Hindu Sarama and Saramia, respectively. The Emperor Julian prayed every night to the occult sun for the intercession of Mercury, since, as Vossius says, every theologian reassures us that Mercury and the sun are one and the same. That is why Mercury used to be considered as the most eloquent and wise of the gods, which should not puzzle us, since Mercury is so very close to the wisdom and the word, or logos, that he has been mistaken by both. Mercury is the third logos, Shiva, the Holy Ghost, the firstborn of creation, our authentic, particular, individual monad. Oh, holy gods! How sad would the fate of the saints be in limbo if Mercury were to abandon them? Mercury, Shiva, great Hierophant, Nuncio, and Wolf of the intimate Christ, supreme hope of those that sleep inside the Holy Sepulchre. I recognized the phallic signal of the boat of Ra when going through the 8th Venusian initiation. Then I shouted in a loud voice, saying, "When the first trumpet sounds, I will resuscitate from amongst the dead. Hail, O great divinity, who navigates on your boat. Having been transported. Here, I appear before you. Let me go up to the bridge and direct the maneuver of the boat, like your servants do, the archons of the planets." Lytolantes felt somewhat sad as she contemplated my holy sepulchre. "Do not be afraid," a Mahatma told her, "his physical body will not die." These words totally calmed her. In that faraway time of my present existence, I had not even died to myself. I continued with the ego very much alive. The sepulchre was then merely symbolic, like the coffin of a Masonic lodge. I did understand, though, in an integral manner, the sepulchral symbolism. I knew that I had to die in myself to have the right to the resurrection of Hiram Abiff, the secret master, inside my heart temple. That initiation ended with precise instructions related to the mission that I am actually fulfilling in this world. Thank you very much for listening, my dear brothers and sisters of the great cause. May your Divine Mother bless you.